Who is? Oh. David. Morning. Yeah. That's so great.
So exactly getting the makeup person was taking his shine on this.
Oh, I owe you for the cookies and.
Oh yeah, I owe you 2 cents or something. I forgot.
What?
10 cents maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just round it off, people. I don't think.
Oh.
I didn't think it was gonna break the bank, but I'm sure I can find it if
Yeah.
need be. Oh. All right.
Thank you.
I did find my. So I was confused as to what we were supposed to print for everybody.
Okay.
She said the learning goals. I did get that. And I didn't know, it didn't sound like it was the entire mid-unit evaluation. It sounded like it was part of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't quite figure that out, that I could copy those pages.
Always safer to print more than.
Well, what I did is I printed 1 copy of everything. Oh my gosh, that wind, I've got this knot in my hair now. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's not only cold, it's windy.
I know. I didn't know how to dress today, so I was afraid of me freezing.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good.
Are we ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Janice is gonna start us off.
Oh, great.
Oh, it's
Oh,
toasty
you
in
should just
here.
hear. Yeah, I know. I wasn't expecting that. Oh, what a pretty shirt you have on.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna get my coffee and everything. Yeah.
So what are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Not going on, but it's good. It's all good.
So we'll have an hour or so with Janice.
Great.
She'll do a didactic, and then we'll do the mid-unit presentations. We got lunch with team. And we'll finish the mid-units and then finish it with covenant group. And then we have IS.
We wanted a few minutes somewhere maybe to work on the team thing too. But maybe we'll do that at lunch. I don't know.
Yeah, we could use.
The self-care thing. I love that piece you made. Is Janice here? Maybe in the bathroom if she's not. She was leaving.
She went to her office.
Does she know we're ready for it?
I don't know if she does.
You could let her know. Oh. You each need to fill this out. So there's information and then kind of a little quiz.
Wait a minute.
Is that on the training thing?
If you fail, you will be kicked out of the program.
Oh no.
Okay, in that case, it's a group quiz, and we're all sitting together when
Is
we
it an
take it,
open
guys.
book
Because remember, it's we all get through together.
This is it's Griffin wants to volunteers.
I had to laugh. Did you get the email where they were looking for a volunteer for an imaging something or other?
Something where they needed a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was laughing to myself because when I was at school in Pittsburgh, that's how we got all our spending money.
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of those at
Have you?
Oh yeah.
They still pay for them?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was good
And
money.
I mean,
then.
they've got
Pretty,
studies for
I make good
everything.
stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to get some
I
cash.
remember we had to drink Gatorade, and then they put a tube down and took the back out of us.
Oh
gosh.
You know? Yeah, but it,
So we'll do
Didn't
this
Yeah.
later. Is that we're not doing this?
Yeah,
well,
don't
I
do it
did
right
a
now.
study in college. It was the brain alcohol
The team is
research
coming
study.
for lunch.
and included an MRI,
maybe we could do-
MRI and a CAT scan and
We
all
could
that.
take half an hour around lunch.
I was thinking, this is for
I know,
not
I know.
that much.
Back in those days,
Can we
we
just
made all
start?
our money.
Yeah,
It was
we could just
great.
start.
I was like, sign me up for more of these. I've done some. Hello.
I didn't know they still did. It's
Oh,
funny, because I haven't been associated with the hospital.
Oh, you?
Yeah, good.
Usually it's like 20 to 30.
Thank
Oh, dollars per thing. Depends on what the study
Did
is.
you bring that?
Yes, those things you gave out, remember, there's, the volunteer
For
banquet
once,
is
I'm ready to
we're gonna have our own.
Yeah,
recognition,
it's
so it's just
toasty.
to let you
I'm-
know.
I prepared for not to go warm now. Yeah.
But the little tests
Yeah, they do,
are due 28.
yes.
So what I just handed you is due 2/28, and it should go to the volunteer office.
Okay.
Yeah, Kathy.
Kathy. So you can probably.
Just before we get started, is there any way to turn the temp down a little bit? Because it's already,
For
and
once,
it's still
it's a little
pumping
too
out
warm.
heat, so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We finally got it warm in here.
Let's go to 70 and see what happens.
Yeah, that's really good plan.
Oh, and I already hear it, it turned out.
Wow,
Okay.
yeah.
Pretty responsive. All right, so nice to see everyone all in the same place, and I'm excited to do another didactic. And so I picked one based on, I think, things that have come up in different groups and different times and in different part of becoming a chaplain and formation, and it's all about listening, which is a primary thing that we all do. I'm going to turn this off so I can listen better. So what this book is, and it's just an interesting book to me, and so that's why I made the little cover thing for you. It's a communication skills book. So different people have used it for different things. It's a pretty recent book. I'm going to say within at least the past 10 years. And corporations also use it because one of the major things that I think we all probably see and feel almost everywhere is people don't listen to each other. And like people talk at the same time and you know, there's things that people will share that are so intimate, and then somebody will ask them what time it is, you know, and it's just to bring, so I like this particular part. So I also work with the residents and the interns. So, and they have noonday conferences. So they look to be more empathetic. They look to, because they're learning so much, and they're so smart, and they know everything medical, and they want to come in and share it, you know, but the person maybe just wants to know, are they going to be out of the hospital by Thursday so they can go to their daughter's graduation? They don't, you know, the blood work doesn't mean, they just want to know, what does it mean right now? Like, what's the most important thing for me? So I like this one, and what it is, it's barriers to listening, or listening blocks. And I have found I have several. And so we'll have more. So this book, if you ever decide you want to buy it, will go through all sorts of things. It'll go through, you know, talking to somebody in a relationship, talking to somebody at work, persuading people. But the one I kind of liked was the blocks to listening. And as we go through it, just think if one hits you at all, that you feel that maybe it's something that could be a block for you. My particular favorite is mind reading. You know, like I already know what you're going to say, and I know what you're thinking. And it's a hard one for me because I feel intuitive a lot, and I can like kind of sense energy and things. But then sometimes I go too far, and the curiosity is replaced with I already know this, and I don't. And I'll give you two stories for it when we go through all these. But so the first one, comparing. So comparing makes it hard to listen because you're always trying to assess who's smarter, more competent, more emotionally healthy, you or the other. And in our case, it might be, am I really getting through this person? Are they really understanding me? Are they really knowing what I'm talking about? So you're always kind of, we're not present. So this is all about being present. We're not present because something else is going on in our mind. So maybe it's comparing, Okay, and if not in a chaplain-patient, maybe in a chaplain-team relationship, maybe chaplain to chaplain, like, am I doing the chaplain job better? But some kind of comparison. So mind reading, my personal favorite, doesn't pay much attention to what people say. In fact, he or she often distrusts it. They're trying to figure out what the person is really saying. So I expanded mind reading to fit me. I'm not really usually doing that. I'm usually, looking at what somebody's saying, and I already think I know what they want to ask me, or I already think I know what they might be feeling, without necessarily being curious about it. Or that in the initial chaplain days, it might be I would name the feeling for them. Oh, you must be really angry. And in my later chaplain days, it would be like, wow, how do you feel about that? Because maybe they're not angry. Maybe I'm misreading their facial cues. Maybe I'm misreading what's going on in the room. So that's one to keep in mind. And rehearsing. So, especially early chaplain days, like I might not be listening to what you're saying because I'm rehearsing what I'm going to say, and I'm wondering, what am I going to say in that prayer? So you're telling me things that might help me, but I'm thinking, how am I going to pray about this? Like, what am I going to say? Maybe I should, and then I realize, I wonder what you just told me. You just told me something about your son. How can I ask a question to find that out again? Filtering. And, we're human, so we all do these. So it's just I like this because it brings more to our attention, and we can kind of name them instead of just feeling like we're not listening. So filtering. So you listen to some things, not to others. You might, person's talking about like what they ate for breakfast, and you're filtering. And then, we get to the stuff about this or that. Only some of that stuff might be they're telling you they can't eat anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling you something deeper than it might appear. And so when we filter, we may miss what those deeper cues are because we're just kind of, we'll get to how they feel about their brother in a minute, or we'll get to when they want to get out of the hospital in a minute. But there might be stuff in the stuff that appears more mundane is not the right word, but more just practical. Judging. Okay, so judging is such a sneaky little one, especially we might feel, and all of us do. And the story I'm going to tell you is I was judging like crazy in this encounter I had with a patient, and it has enormous power, and it also separates us, like, oh my goodness, this person is talking too much, they don't really want to hear what I'm going to say, or I might think, they're just not that educated, or I might not think it in my head, but I may pick up on a cue. Like when we went around and did this as a group in one of my CPE groups, it was so funny the stuff we judged people on, whether or not they had teeth, whether or not they fixed their hair, whether or not they had a lot of junk on the table, like they had all sorts of things on the table and they're pulling stuff out. And it's like, there's such subtle judgments, and it's until we actually think about them, and there's nothing wrong with it. We all do this, so it's just noticing it so we do it less. Like that's all of what this learning is always about.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so interesting to hear, the subtle things that we had judgments on once we actually thought about it. Like when we were doing verbatim, all of a sudden, we'd be writing like our interpretation, and somebody would say, well, where does that come from? And then it'd be like, because they had a lot of stuff on their table. Throw it. And, and so realizing that and having insight into that could help. Dreaming. Sometimes we're just preoccupied. We're somewhere else. Or we took our own daydream because they said something that identified something in us. And all of a sudden we launched into our own story.
Mm-hmm.
And we launched into, we're another place. We're 15 years ago. We're in Nebraska. And then we realize I haven't heard a word they've said in the last 2 minutes. And they're looking at me. And it happens. We could be bored or anxious and dream. We could go off on something. A lot of it for chaplains, some of the meat of this, at least in the groups that I've been in, is when stuff is too horrible, we tend to do more of these things because it's just so hard to listen sometimes to such sadness and suffering, and we can look for an escape hatch. Like one of the groups I was in used to call it the haunted house. What scary room won't you go in? Will you not go in this room? Because it will. So wherever you find yourself separating from someone and realize you're doing this, it's food for thought. Mm-hmm. It's like something to bring up in a verbatim. And if you find yourself doing it, every time somebody talked about losing a friend who was young, I stopped listening. And so then, what is it for that? Like, what could you learn from that would help you stay with that person? Mm-hmm. Identifying, yeah, that is bad pain. I remember when my foot hurt like that. Like you did that when we were doing the role play a lot. Yeah. Like, oh, you've been married, whatever you said. 60 years, I've been married 3, and like you identify and then you go off with yourself, but these are a lot of these for us, and you won't find that in this book, is ways to separate from really pain, either our own pain, their pain, because it's really sometimes very difficult to be there. And advising, what you should do about that? I have a great scripture reading for you. I have a great book you can have. You need coffee? Anything to tell them.
No, I'm just laughing.
And what it does, is it stops us from being eye to eye, face to face. Like advising, now we moved up here. I could tell you how to fix this. I could tell you what to do. Dreaming, we're off over here. Like staying with somebody, in trauma, in shock, in someone who's struggling to speak because the words are hard, but they want to tell you something, and it takes a long time. Those are all places for us to leave. Sparring. Sparring is an interesting one. And it's kind of like, you see people like the put down, discounting. For example, I might actually read this one because it's an interesting one to me. And until I saw this book, I didn't really think of it. It's arguing and debating with people, but the other person never feels heard because you're quick to disagree. Oh, I just feel so bad. My mother, she's been here my whole life. Well, she's 90. She lived a long life. I don't want to talk anymore now. I want to tell you about my mom. I don't want to talk anymore. That's kind of a sparring. Repeat, and the way to avoid sparring is to repeat back and acknowledge what you heard. Your mother, she's been here your whole life. And the person will keep going. One side is the put down. Where being dismissed or dismissing someone for what they're trying to say can make people feel invisible. I don't know that it would come up in an obvious way as a chaplain, but it might come up in a more subtle way, and so that would just be something to kind of take a look at. And the discounting, for people who can't accept compliments too, thank you for listening to me. That really helped. Oh, I didn't do anything. It discounts the other person in a way because they are trying to tell you made a difference to me, and you don't want to go the other way and go, I did feel pretty good about that, but you want to. Thank you. It was a privilege to be here with you. Thank you. I felt honored. How did it feel to share? You want to, stay with them. The advising could be, I feel like God works through me, which I think we probably do feel like God feels, but the person wants you there then, so just to think of all these things, being right, being right is an obvious one. Being right is rampant today of who's right, and a lot of times there isn't a right. There's your perception, your perception, your perception, your perception. We all have a perception, and if we listen to each other, we'd probably come to a more global sense of what actually is. We all know what we feel and think, and so the question becomes, like I know the patient didn't want to, I know the patient wasn't able to speak, or I know I didn't need to. Do we know it, or could we be curious about it? And we might know it. We might have read all the stuff. We might know that now's a good time to leave, but are we? So it's questions. And derailing, suddenly changing the subject. That was the worst day of my life. I've never experienced a worse loss than that. I didn't even know a person could be alive and feel that bad. You leave a moment and then you move on to another subject. Earlier you were talking about this. Like they're trying to bring you into their pain. So stay with them, and sometimes some of the really early chaplain groups, you'd offer to get somebody something. Can I get your prayer shawl? Can I get you, something? Or get a family member water, get a family member something. But they want you to stay with them because hardly anybody can listen like a chaplain can listen. Family's going to want to try to heal or help them, maybe. Friends are going to, go a certain point and then say, this is something different. Like a chaplain is the one who really can receive. And then placating. Yeah, you're right. That's good. That's true. No, it is hard. And not really listening or getting into it with them. So I went over these very, very generally. Do any of them hit you? Do any of them seem like, that might be something that I feel more familiar with than others?
The placating one does to me, and I guess I never thought of that as a block. I can place myself yesterday at the cancer care center and know that I did that.
Agreeing with everything?
Well, just, right? I mean,
I think it's more in the quote unquote negative part of it is not just those words at the beginning.
Like some of it is to have people talk, like I'm here with you, I'm nodding, I'm with you. But if the whole conversation ends and it was like a decent in-depth conversation, did you maybe ask questions? Did you ask about feelings? Did you try to take it a little bit deeper?
okay.
So some of it is you want somebody to talk, so
Right.
you have to, agree or you have to somehow connect with them. But just, think about these.
Yeah, I can actually, I think there's certain ones that ring truer for me than others, but in visiting lots of different patients, like I can think of probably a patient for every single one of these, where it's just like different situations bring about like someone says something and then I'm dreaming, even though I might not normally be dreaming related to certain conversations or.
You're onto something good, and if in your mind, you don't write verbatims for every patient you see, but if you kind of track it, like what triggered the dream, and it could just be you're tired, it could be physical, you're tired, like this is the 7th person you've listened to in a row, but it could be more, and if you find the same kind of triggers where you start backing away or you start doing something else, then there's learning in it for you. There's an opportunity there to say, I wonder if I'm backing away when I hear this, and what does it mean for me, and then could I let go of that so I could be there with them?
I think the only one that does not resonate with me, because I've definitely, like what Laura was saying, I can think of visits where I've done most of these, is rehearsing. That's one that I definitely do not resonate with at all. So I guess I can cross that one off. It's not ever been in my mentality to be like, okay, well, they're saying this, then I'm going to say that, and
Even with thinking of a prayer.
No, when someone says, when we are about to pray, then I do sort of go back through the conversation and say, okay, well, what stuck out, what might be a good thing to bring up in the prayer, but I'm not rehearsing what that's going to sound like.
Think of it too in a, and that's a good thing to note in a more charged situation. Like, I don't know how the IPR group goes, or if you're with your, there's family dynamics, or if there's something going on in class, like, or wherever, church, like you can feel like anger. I find myself rehearsing sometimes then, because I'm trying to read like really quickly how angry, what's the anger at, and so I'm trying to, think of, but just, give it a little air. But, I think we mostly probably do most of these at some point. And some of them are probably okay, because it's just part of being human. But if we see a pattern, is kind of what this is looking for, or you always really notice when you back away. How about you, Gina? Did you anything hit you?
I would say, I don't know, I don't think I spar too often, but a lot of them just here and there, like you said, different visits. But I think it's, for me, probably the advising, like, I've got this little thing in my head that, like, wants to help, and I can't say I do that all the time, but I'm aware of it sometimes, and I, like, try to turn it off.
Yeah.
Like it's there. It's a tendency.
Yeah, and being aware of it is,
Yeah.
That noticing it is the first part. If we don't notice it, we can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fixer, comes up a lot in chaplaincy too. Of I'd rather get you this water and tissues than listen. Which of course they might need tissues. I mean, I'm not saying don't get them tissues, but then listen to how bad this is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really bad. And so if I just left the room, I could come back in. And we had
I'm not usually leaving the room now. I will say that.
we had one verbatim in one of the CPE classes where he just talked about getting everybody coffee, but they wanted it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, they were exhausted. They wanted it. And then as we just looked at the whole thing, because you could order coffee, like you can do it once and you can get a tray. Like you can. It was the pain of what had happened, and someone had lost their best friend, and it was a similar situation in his life.
Wow.
And the words that were coming out of everybody's mouth were the same words that he could remember. Like, it was so painful to be there, but it wasn't obviously apparent. Like, I think sometimes we protect ourselves because we want to survive this and we want to be there with them. It's only later in the reflections, I'm sure people are writing for you, or in the verbatims that, oh, I wonder this. So it's just stuff to be conscious of.
I was going to say, for me, it like, we're all going to do these things, but it's what you choose to do with them.
Yes.
Like, identifying. I definitely talk to people and they say something, and I'm like, if this was a friendship, if this was coffee hour after church, I would launch into the story of the time the dog stole my homework or whatever. That story doesn't exist, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
But it's about consciously saying in myself, okay, that's not what this is about, or just shelving that identification for later so that I can process it, or just remember it, because sometimes after a visit, when I'm out in the hallway, it's fun to think back on that memory.
I agree with you, Liz, because the thing, when we were going through these and we came to judging, I certainly agree that there's the negative part of judging, but also sometimes you do need to make judgments about a patient, and that can, and I think I've realized that I'm maybe not observing those things enough. Like, when you said that about a patient who has a lot of stuff on the table, I could think of someone, and I thought, I don't know if I really had processed that in the time of when I was visiting with this patient of, oh yeah, he's got a lot of stuff on the table, and like, so almost actually needing to judge a little bit more of just like being aware of the external situation and other things, rather than like actually listening so much and just focusing on what someone's saying and not processing the other, body language and external cues and things.
Yeah, you're making great points. I mean, we have to make judgments, because then that's how we're figuring out what to say next. Do we ask a question now? Do we do this? I guess, part of when I tell you the story, I'm going to tell you, like, I was making a judgment that was separating me from a patient. So that's the thing to look for. Is this separating me from being present? And if not, you're going to be a minister too. So you might identify sometimes with people. Like you might, and it might be fine. Like you're joining them, and you're joining them in this experience. Like it's more about to me the heavy duty chaplain listening. And there's times where we do it, and times where we just want to be as present as possible as we can. Any other comments before I talk about the story?
I was just going to say, sometimes I think a tiny bit of some of these is okay to build a rapport with someone. Sometimes people, I feel like, you like tight rope, like you got this rope and you're drawing them out, like sometimes they're, and it's just, it may be they're a very private person, but it might also be that they're just not used to, they don't really understand their feelings, so sometimes I feel like it's okay to identify a little bit as long as I don't launch into my whole story, but let them know that, yeah, I've been there too, yeah, I had a sister-in-law like that too, or whatever, but to not launching down that rabbit hole. But it's more just to build a little rapport, not to use it as a crutch or to disappear.
And it's a delicate balance. Like you want to connect with the person.
Yeah.
But then when at least for me, I get to the point where, I have a sister-in-law like that. I've made a lot of assumptions. You've told me a little bit, and I've jumped to something different.
Mm-hmm.
So you just want to be conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one is going to be right in every different situation. Like you can't walk in and somebody's going to just tell you everything, right away. They want to checking you out. I'm going to reveal something that I'm really deeply worried about. Can you take it? Can you receive it from me? And if not, I'm not going to tell you. So it's really just different ways to think of how do you open the space for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Laura and I were having this conversation the other night when we worked together at dinner. Often, I will introduce myself and say I'm an interfaith chaplain, here at the hospital. And, I'll say and I'm covering the ED tonight or whatever, And sometimes they will say, but what faith are you? Or, And the first time anyone says that, I always try to come back with interfaith. And my reasoning was that I don't want to say I'm Catholic, because often I have found that people who were born Catholic and are not practicing as Catholics now are shut off by the fact that if you're Catholic, then they can't say how they really feel. And if they're going to talk about their feelings about God and where they're at now, some of it comes from where they were, type of thing. And, we were discussing, if somebody really point blank says, if they say, do you have a church, do you have a church? I say, no, just the hospital. I answer honestly, but I try not to give that information because I don't want to impact what road we're going to go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Go ahead. I was thinking about this last night on my way home, and I was thinking, I just wanted to maybe offer a different way of looking at it. I was thinking that I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable identifying as an interfaith chaplain, because if I say I'm an interfaith chaplain, this is an interfaith spiritual care department, but if I say I am an interfaith chaplain, I feel like I'm then saying that I have the authority and understanding to speak about other faiths. Like I'm saying, I as an interfaith chaplain have the ability, have the knowledge, have the experience to speak to a Buddhist, or speak to a Muslim, or speak to a Jewish person in the language and the knowledge of their tradition, and I don't have that knowledge. So I just thought, I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable saying that, because the truth of the matter is, yes, we're interfaith chaplains, but I personally am a Christian, so anything I say is going to be, tinged with a Christian lens. That's just the nature of it, and I can turn that on and off. but I would not want to walk into a room and have someone who was a non-Christian be misled into thinking that I had knowledge or training of in their tradition that I didn't have. So it was just something I was thinking about on the way home.
And see, I see it as when I say I'm interfaith chaplain, I'm saying that I'm willing to listen to anyone's faith beliefs. I'm open to whatever. And I'm also, I hope, very open to be taught. So if you tell me you're, XYZ and I have never heard of XYZ, my thing would be, is there anything about yours you would like to share with me? I'm willing to learn.
Yeah. Well, this conversation came about. Sorry, we're kind of derailed, but I think this is really. It's something that we had talked about, and I do think it's really
We
valuable.
all get asked all the time.
I was saying, I think I was recognizing I need to get better at like deflecting those questions, because I think oftentimes when I'm asked, I'll start to say something and then I'll like see a look from the patient that I interpret as them having a question and wanting to know more, and then I just say too much. And but I usually just say, I'm a chaplain and we serve people of many different traditions or no tradition, and I'm here to listen. But I need to like cut myself off there and stop then when they're like, well, but what are you? And that's, yeah.
I kind of don't. I mean, the thing is, they will ask. They always people. What I find is people of faith want to know. They come up, what church do you go to? That's what I find, is that like when they're really religious, like they think I'm from this area. I mean, they probably all think we're all from this area. It's very funny, and they all want to know what church I go to. I'm like, well, I don't really live in this area, But if they ask me more than once, I'll usually just say, I grew up Catholic, but I'm Unitarian Universalist now, and I you now. You should just say you. No one has a clue what that is anyway, so it doesn't matter. So end of discussion. It's great. It works.
So, this is a great topic, and I think it is a little bit of a tangent, but it's important, and I think every chaplain is probably going to have a different way of even self-identifying, much less kind of engaging with that initial conversation is really about setting the contract. Who am I? What's my role as a chaplain? What do they understand about that? Giving enough information so that they have, so they can
hopefully feel safe.
Trust and get the contract of what they're really asking is this safe on one level. There's a little bit of a need for information, which could be a speaking way of moving away, right? If we're just talking about facts, they're avoiding, how are you feeling? And that's something to kind of assess for yourself. So, it's just, I think this conversation is one that can go on and will go differently with, even if we ask this question to all the chaplains, we would probably get different
You get very different
answers.
And it's about finding your own style in your own rhythm. It might be different with different types of patients too, right? And I would, to bring it back to this a little bit, kind of what's having a second lens of when those questions are asked of you, what is the need that they have, whether it's feeling safety or avoiding how they're feeling. That might be two poles. And then how can you bring it back to how are you feeling, while also, not just shutting them down and saying, how are you feeling, right? Kind of working it sensitively.
Well, I'm glad that you shared that, Doreen, about what you said, how your thought of a Catholic being maybe perceiving you, like, because if you say you're Catholic, and because I often think, oh, if I see, if I'm going to say that I'm not Catholic and it says someone's Catholic, they want someone Catholic and they're not going to be happy if I say that. So I just, it's just so interesting how we perceive things differently. And
that comes back.
Yeah,
Some of that the mind reading, because I do the same thing. If someone is Catholic,
Do you want me to be Catholic or do you not want
Yes.
me to be
I feel like if I say I'm not Catholic, they're going to be like, oh, that's a
can be
letdown.
either one.
Which one would you
Yeah.
like? Which hat should I put on before I walk in the room?
So, I want to ask a curious question. So, how would it be to walk into a room with no faith lens? What would you say?
If it says none, you mean, or if I have no lens?
If you're broadening your lens
Mm-hmm.
and it's going beyond what what faith you're grounded in, what faith that person is, what words maybe could you use? So they could be anything. They could have faith, no faith. They could be atheists. They could be this. You want to be with them.
Mhm.
So what's the broadest way you could come in that you would feel comfortable with? Something to think about. Like I could hear the interfaith debate. Once you bring interfaith in, then you're talking about faith.
Right, you've used that word.
Right. So did you open a door for faith? I don't know. For some people, probably yes. For other people, probably no. Did you? I'm a chaplain. I'm Laura. I'm a chaplain. I'm here making my rounds. How are you doing? Very simple, neutral. What are you going to get back? I think there's always a little Catholic panic because Catholic patients will ask.
Speaking
for
as a
things.
Catholic.
Yeah.
I like that Catholic panic.
Well, no, because Catholic patients will ask for things most other patients don't ask for. They'll ask for communion. They'll ask for a priest to do sacrament of the sick. And there's that trying to get it for them. So I think sometimes that causes a little, just a little. I want to make sure I do it right, and I want to make sure I do it. So it's just something to think about. And these kind of things are, and when you think about it, is it something you feel safer with? Like if you walk in and you say, I'm an interfaith, are you narrowing it because you feel safer? Are you offering, so it's something to really think about. It took me a while to get my, 3 sentences I felt really good about, I'm Janice, I'm one of the chaplains from Griffin. I'm just making my rounds, wondering how you are. And then stop talking, I always go on every floor, and then I go to this floor, and then I go to that floor, and then I go to this, I just stop talking and see what you get, and that was hard at the beginning to stop talking.
I tend to use, if someone doesn't say they have a faith tradition or it's just it's a conversation that's going somewhere, but there's no, I'll use words like spirit and presence and being present and things that are more, at least to my mind, sort of mindfulness-y based words. That are not necessarily tied to faith, but you could take them that way if you wanted to.
Actually, let me ask you a question. If you left a visit and what they believe didn't really come up, is it a successful visit?
I think it depends.
I have a lot of visits like that. I don't know why that is. I think it might be because I'm down at the ED a fair amount, and there's just younger people, there's some very old people, but there's also quite a few younger people. And I think a lot of them really don't have a religious tradition that they're identifying with. So sometimes I'll ask them, what is there anything that gives you comfort or support, and they won't go there. They will. Sometimes it feels like the elephant, like they're not going there on purpose. They don't want to go there. And then if I do follow it up and say, do you belong to any sort of faith tradition? And they'll say no. So it's kind of interesting, but I don't feel like those visits are failures. To answer your question, sometimes I come out of there and I'm like, should I have pushed a little further about their faith? Like, like, did they run from something that they grew up with? But that's not really what it's about. Like, if they were talking about something they're going through, then I feel like it was still a good visit, if they were expressing how scared they are, or like something, if it was coming out, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like that's a
So
wasted
I'll ask a couple of curious questions, and this is a great discussion. Like, this is how you're figuring out, like, the formation and your pastoral authority and all of that. So I'll give you for instance. So I rarely get asked what my faith is. So then I'm curious about that. Like, so if you're feeling like you're asked that a lot, then think of what you say. And does it come up a lot for a reason? I don't know the answer to that. Did you just happen to run into a lot of patients where that's important? Like, so for me, like, lots of the patients have things that bring them peace. It doesn't have anything to do with a religion or a faith, and some of the questions, like if you've gone a couple times or you've really gotten involved in a deep discussion with somebody, and they tell you like all these struggles in their lives, and it's like it can be overwhelming. Like, what kind, this had to be so, and then sometimes the question about, wow, what helped you in the past? How did you get through this? What was it like? And they'll tell you what helped them.
Yeah.
It may not be.
Yeah. Might have been alcohol.
No, I didn't mean. I meant it may have been. They had friends around them. It may have been. They always gardened. It may have been they. They always visited a shrine in Bridgeport. It may have been, but if without curiosity, we won't know. So like when, as you're thinking of, analyzing how, or reflecting, I guess would be the way to put it, when you write the reflections, like the more you can notice about yourself and what people seem to say to you commonly, the more to look at, I wonder why that is, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about this, as I was kind of like running through the patients that have asked me that the most, if I had to like make a statement about them, I would say it's generally older patients. I'm coming into the room and I'm saying, hi, I'm Laura, I'm a chaplain, we like to check in with all new patients, blah, blah, blah. And often it's when there's a couple. It's if it's the husband and his wife is there, or the wife and the husband is there, and between the two of them, someone will ask me. That's if I'm thinking of when does this most often happen, and so I perceive that maybe as I'm a woman coming into this room, I'm a younger woman coming into this room. Those are the assumptions I'm making about why are these people asking me what kind of a church are you a part of, or where are you coming from.
So let's all do a mind read. Why could people be asking that?
I've had similar experiences. It's mostly been older women who will identify themselves as Catholic, wanting to know what I am, but I don't find it regularly. I think gender is part of it. That's part of my mind read. Gender is maybe something.
Well, like I said, it's usually people that seem to have a faith tradition and belong to a congregation, and then they want to know. Like, I think it's kind of like they want to know who you are, and if you're local, like they want to know what church. Oh yeah, no, so and so. Like, to me, I think it's kind of like a way not to talk about what's going on with them. They, maybe it's a way to get to know me, but I think it's really more like they want to go off a tangent. That's conversational rather.
More informational than emotional.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Sometimes I've had a lot of people though expressing guilt at saying like, oh well, we used to go to the Methodist church, but we can't go anymore. It's too hard because of health. I've had that a lot actually, of people saying, I think they want to ask because they want to know, are you connected to that church that I used to go to, or.
I don't know. I mean, the times I've been asked what faith I was, it's always been by a Catholic. as far as I can remember. I mean, not
Same-
that I've
same
kept it written
with me.
down, but
Same
it
with
just
me.
seems
That's
to me
funny.
now that we're processing this, that it's always been someone who says,
Yeah.
you know, that either I knew going in they were Catholic or I didn't know. In the beginning, I used to look, and then I stopped that because I felt not knowing was better. And you know, but you know, and I purposely don't wear. I mean, I have a zillion crosses, but I purposely don't wear them here.
Mm.
And I try, you know, now that this has all come up, I think, do I look Catholic? What is it? Do I act Catholic?
Those
What-
are the, you're into curiosity now, and that's the goal of this. You're into curiosity, and like, you know, you have each other, and you have the group, and you have, you know, like, you know, what is it?
Yeah,
like,
do I
like-
give off vibes? I mean, I'm suddenly wondering, like, what? Because you're saying it doesn't come up, and I'm thinking, wow, do I have a Catholic aura about me or something? I mean, like,
Well, most patients are Catholic, so I think if they,
Do you
they're
I think I
There's a
I-
lot here.
Yeah.
I do look too. I look because
or it says they're Catholic, whether they
right.
consider
If they
themselves
identified
Catholic.
as Catholic, right. I like to look because if I'm doing a prayer with someone, if it's a Catholic person, I may offer to do the Hail Mary or the Our Father. Whereas if it's someone who has like no faith, I wouldn't go there. You know, I'll make one up on the spot. So I will look for that reason only.
So it's curiosity. It's curiosity, just to, you know, think about it and see, and go from there. I just want to make sure we just get to 2 more points, but you're all like, that's the whole point of this.
And I feel like it's
Yeah.
mostly men,
Never
and
have
I think with
conversations
men it is
with us.
avoidance
Yeah.
for me. 'Cause, you know,
I've never had anyone ask me.
you've never
It's
had a
always
man ask you?
boys.
Really?
no, I've had men.
Yeah, you have had men too. Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
I'm inclined to get from men, you know, at the end of, thank you so much, my dear. Like, do I come across as 10?
So, you know, you're making really good points, and what you're talking about is pastoral authority, you know, and there's such a fine line, and you know, there's such a fine line with being viewed as someone's daughter as opposed to someone's equal. So, you know, thinking about how to do that, and it's a work, because you know you're gonna find it in your ministry, like everybody when they started out. But it happens, you know, it'll happen, and it'll, how do you feel about it, and then what do you say, and like the dismissing part, you know, the dismissing of, some of that is fear, but then there's also times where, I'll tell you, somebody wants to talk to somebody younger, for whatever solace that brings, so it's just curiosity again, you don't know, and then to not make our own assumptions about
Or
why
the
somebody's
boyfriend
not
either.
listening.
In a way, I love that there's so many different types of chaplains here, and I think we bring different things to it too, because I always feel like, you know, well, if I didn't feel like I had a great rapport with that person, maybe someone else will in 2 days or 3 days, next time they're seeing if they're still here. You know,
Well, every one of you brings something different.
right?
You know?
Right.
So I just wanted to real quick go to my favorite, mind reading. So if you approach a patient and they say, I'm tired, what's the mind read that you might have? You walk in, you do your spiel.
That they want you to leave.
What's another mind read?
But they didn't sleep last night.
What's another mind read?
The medication is making them sleepy.
What's another mind read?
They're not interested.
What's another mind read?
All I can think is that they want me to leave. Maybe they just came up from the ED.
Or they could be, they didn't sleep all night. They could be tired from life. Like they're telling you, I'm tired.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh,
only
weird.
curiosity will tell us. And like I'm trying to bring up ones where the urge to run out is apparent. You know, I'm tired. Oh, should I come back at a better time?
Yeah.
You know, and like think of the neutral phrase you might say that might lead them to say more. It's got to be awfully tiring being in here. and then see. They might want you to leave. Like a lot of people come into their rooms, you know, and we're pretty much one of the few that they can say, you're not putting the ID in, you know, they might want me, but you know,
I always took it that they wanted you to leave. I never thought about just tired of being tired of.
I know
Fighting,
that's a
tired
really
of-
good interpretation.
Yeah, I like.
I loved it.
Yeah,
It's nice.
tired of just.
When someone's wanted me to leave, it's been much clearer than that.
Yeah, like I'm trying to sleep.
No, like I've had people. I was telling Doreen this last night. There was one man, and I came and said, "Hi, I'm Liz. I'm one of the chaplains. We try to see everyone." And he said, "You've seen me.
Oh my gosh, okay then.
You've seen me."
Okay, all right.
We're done.
Nothing changed.
And I said, "Okay, this is absolutely a clear
yeah.
Patient
Say we're
decline
done.
care.
yes. Yep, I've seen you.
Okay.
You've seen me. We're done.
Okay.
You can move on."
The royal you or the accusatory you.
Yeah. Okay, I hope that you are able to get better. And
That's,
Yeah.
I usually say, like, I hope you have a good night's rest, because I'm here in the night.
Yeah. So what do you say?
I said to him, something along the lines of, "Noted, got it. I hope that your stay here is pleasant and comfortable, and you're able to go home as soon as you can." Great, and then just left.
I usually will try to give a little bit of orientation too. If I could, even if someone's like really, they want me just to leave, I'll just say, if, we're chaplains, we're here to listen. If you want to talk to someone, you can always just let your nurse know and they can page a chaplain. Just so that they've got, at least they know, I'm seeing you, yes, I've seen you, but if you change your mind, like,
Right, something else comes up.
yeah.
So I'll end with a story. So this, how you learn a lot from patients. All of a sudden, when you reflect, you learn a lot from patients, and hopefully become better chaplains. But I think of this one patient all the time, and not all the time, a lot, and I pray for him now. So this was when I was at John Dempsey Medical Center, and they have Department of Correction there, and that's where a lot of the patients or inmates go for their care. And during that time, they can't have family come in. They're in a locked unit. There's 3 locked doors. Their 2 feet are shackled to the bed. One arm is shackled to the bed. One arm is free. And to go there as a chaplain, you watch a video, and it tells you can't have your last name on the badge. Said do not tell any personal information. You blah, blah, blah. So it's it hypes it up for you. So to be careful. So the staff there was like wonderful, and there's no privacy. I mean, there's it's all windows. Everybody can see everything. There's 2 patients to a room. They're very close together, so the conversations, there's you can't really have one. But I did find overall it was some of the richest conversations I ever had, because they just don't have people to talk to about this, and they wanted to tell you what was happening, and they wanted somebody to say, wow, and they were finding God and finding themselves. It was really something. Like I left almost every day changed. And this one day I go in and there's 2 patients, and this patient is right here, and he's older, and I say, I tell him I'm Janice, like that. So I go to the next bed, and it's a younger guy. He's probably like mid-22. He's around probably my son's age, a little bit younger by then, and he starts talking right away, and he's talking about his life and how he didn't know his father, and the only thing he knows about his father is the disease he inherited, and he's in this bed, and it's drugs and all drug related, and he's telling me all these personal, vulnerable stories. So what am I thinking?
This could be my son.
I'm thinking, everybody knows people of that age where these kind of things happen, so I'm like hyped up, and I'm feeling really bad for him. But now I'm 4 feet away from this guy. What am I thinking? Do you know what's
Like, how's he processing all this?
Yeah.
how's he processing this? Because he could hear every single word.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And this young kid is saying all these vulnerable things, and I didn't even have a conversation with him. I don't know what's going on. So I start moving into the mind read. I start like kind of protecting him. Like I'm changing where my chair is, so maybe he'll hear less. I'm dropping my voice, so maybe his voice will drop a little bit. And he's telling me all these vulnerable things and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, the nurse comes and they take the other guy to for a test. When he leaves the room, he says to me, he goes, "And can we pray for him? They just told him he has lung cancer and he's really scared." So all my mind reads of like prison life, you know, and like hyped up from the video and how gruff this guy is, just were blown out of the window by this very loving young man who's worried about his person there. So like that, you know, and I share the story, and I've shared it a few times because I'm so grateful that happened, because we could have if he didn't go for a test, we could have ended the conversation. I could have thought, oh, I protected him, you know. But I get teary-eyed almost every time I think about it. Like this kid who, you know, ended up there, and hopefully he's out, and hopefully he's, you know, leading a better life. But he had such a hard life, and his concern was for him. So that to me was my resolve. I mean, never again. And of course I still do, but at least I'm conscious of doing it, you know. And I just think I thank him like lots of times for things he taught me. And so, you know, think about it. When you're not listening to someone, how come you're not? And what could be different? Yeah.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank
you
you.
very much. It was a pleasure.
I love the other teaching you did with us too. Is great.
Oh, the deeper.
Yeah.
Going deeper. Yeah. Yeah, the next one, if you want it, will be on the unknown. Being in the unknown.
Well, and I just really appreciated our opportunity to have a conversation, because we have not had much opportunity to like really share about how we all encounter patients differently. A lot of times when we have our like group time, it's how are you processing this, and that was really valuable.
Yeah,
Thanks for
you know,
all
and
that.
that's a thing to think about too, like, you know, with yourselves too, like at lunch, you know,
Mhm.
like what does come up? Like, and you know, and part of what I had to lose at the beginning was the competitive chaplaincy. That's the better chaplain, you know, and it stopped me from learning faster. You know what I mean? Like I had to like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it? You are. You're here. Like something called you here. You're here. You're doing it. You know, you're staying here. It's not easy to be here, but something's calling you here. So just like go open up to, you know, and see what happens.
The unknown.
The unknown. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And did you notice if I did any of these, like not listening to you? Did you notice if I did dismissal? We will. Yeah. We will.
Well, we are human.
Exactly.
As long as we realize it.
All right. Thank you. And text when you're free. Okay. Great.
Free. You probably feel like you don't have half a minute yourself when you're here. That's
You're
always
the opposite of free when you're here.
Yeah, I know. That's an oxymoron.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm perpetually triple booked.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
I was thinking about that. You know,
So-
when I was doing the business
Yeah,
unit
which,
evaluation, I felt bad for you.
So that would be rehearsing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like rehearsing. What time can I meet with her? Wow. What are we gonna do about it? Whose I asked was supposed to be at lunch? Gina's, right?
I don't remember. Yeah,
It
maybe.
wasn't me. I know
Okay.
that
It
much.
wasn't.
I
Yeah,
was
it
not-
might
I
be
was
me.
supposed to be this morning.
It might be. Oh,
Since it's my sibling's birthday tomorrow, I specifically did not do anything today because I thought we might be doing something. So
Okay.
I know I was not today.
no,
Yes.
but we're not, because we're meeting with team anyway. Right? Okay, so it's fine.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We can reschedule.
And it is good to talk about kind of, you each have different experiences and you don't see each other that much.
Mm.
And just being able to compare and share stories, I think is really
Mm-hmm.
valuable.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I think that's why I like the 4 to 8 when I'm with one of you.
Ah.
You know, I haven't had Gina, but it's nice. You know, not that I haven't talked to the other chaplains, but they're in a different place. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that sometimes they don't want to talk shop, but sometimes they don't.
It depends on who they are. Some of them are very happy to, and some of them don't.
So, but, you know, our conversations, you know, are very useful in processing, you know, what's going on in the minute, you know,
Mhm.
I mean, you know, so.
Yeah, I'm here a lot, and it's like with them, with the other chaplains. So sometimes if we're down having a coffee break or lunch, they may not want to talk about it, but if I need to talk about something, I'll just talk about it with them. And I force them to, if I need to talk about something, it's good. And
And do you
they're great.
feel-
No, they're great.
Do you feel that they're listening?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Or they coming up with
Sometimes.
those strategies.
Yeah,
Some.
I get more
sometimes
feedback
I feel
from some of them.
dismissed by,
Oh.
Dismissed.
one or two of them in particular.
I have felt that way, but if I need to talk about something, they're usually willing to talk about it. And some may share more than others, but that's okay. Doesn't matter as long as I'm getting whatever it was I needed.
Right. I mean, a big question there is, what do you need?
Mhm, mhm.
Right. And in what way can they listen? What kind of listening do you need them to give you?
Mhm. It's good. It's been fun. And if I need to take time to just go back to the chapel and sit there and think about something or pray about something, I do, because you gotta process whatever. That's like you're not here to talk to, I gotta just do it, however I have to do it. Okay.
Any final word?
I love what she said. Is there something that comes up a lot, or that people ask you a lot? I love that, because I have to think about that. I don't know if there is, but I want to think about that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Thought.
Or the flip side of that is there something you find yourself saying a lot, like to the same,
Yeah.
are you all like that was what started this actually of the conversation Doreen and I had of saying I find myself over explaining about my tradition
Mhm.
and that was what led to that reflection for me. But so
Yeah.
for all of us, there's
Well, it might be that like Catholics, like they don't like most people. I find a lot of people don't know what chaplain is, so sometimes they want to know what a chaplain is, or they have a negative like, "Are you coming to give me last rites?" I've had people ask me that, which is crazy, but because they don't look like they're dying, you know what I mean? So I don't know why they think that. But the other thing is that it might just be that we're all women, right? And if they're Catholic, they don't quite understand what a chaplain is. Like they're not used to that because they're used to priests being male, and I don't know. So I that's why I'm thinking, you say it's mostly Catholics that ask you that. For me, it's people of a faith tradition, that go to a congregation or church.
Yeah. One thing I was reminded of is how being young, looking young,
Mhm.
and how I dress,
Mhm.
I notice that it brings out different things in the patients. Like having a suit and tie. When I was at St. Mary's Hospital in Waterbury, I would wear a collar,
Mhm.
so that everybody assumed I was a Catholic priest.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which that was kind of that was my outfit, and it worked, and I had
Is that intentional?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it
Yeah.
worked, and I'd rather disabuse people of the assumption that I was a Catholic church than have to. It gave me authority.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say.
Yeah.
In a very Catholic hospital,
Yes.
people,
Yes.
and that
I could
worked.
see that.
And the question there is, what does the authority? How does authority help or hinder? Because sometimes it hinder, and I'd have to say I am not Catholic,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I might come out and say it that way
Mhm.
if people were saying, "Oh my gosh, am I dying?" Or they automatically threw up a guilt, like I don't go to church or whatever, or just I'm not going to talk to you because I hate Catholic priests, whatever it was. How does it work in the relationship, and particularly how does it boost my ego versus help the conversation? Because it was great being. It was like I had an in. But how is it not about me ultimately?
Mhm.
How is it about making it helpful? And those are all curious questions, right? To have and to walk in with, and to be willing to. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And kind of work with it. Yeah, and that's part of what I love about chaplaincy, that it's, you never know what's going to come up, and you're always kind of, I feel like there's an investigative piece to it that's kind of a puzzle piece, figuring out that I enjoy as kind of, let's see what happens. Let's try to figure it out. It's mental, but it's also, how do I help the person be emotional, where our culture often avoids that. How can I facilitate that kind of presence? And it's different for everybody. And the kind of the takeaway with all of this is try to incorporate these terms, now that we've got them, there's a common language, incorporate these terms into your verbatims, into your mental Rolodex of what's happening in this visit right now. Why is this not working? Am I doing anything? And kind of the next level beyond that is apply it to each other. If you sense that maybe someone's doing one of these, how does it feel for you to check that out? That's the kind of confrontation / feedback / helping each other get better. It's all part of the CPE culture. Awesome. Let's jump right into mid-units. Does anybody need a 2-minute break?
Yeah, I need to go to the restroom.
Okay. Who's ready? I know you got.
Mine's over there.
I have everything.
Does everybody have everything printed up that needs to be?
I
For
think
everybody?
I need to make copies, so I can go run and do that real quick. But so I
Okay.
just a little, so the parts that we want to share with others, I mean, the parts that we want to make copies would be like the last question,
goals.
obviously.
The 3 things are your goals and any changes, so that we can all be on the same page and helping each other.
Okay.
Number 2 is feedback to each other, so peer relationship
Okay.
feedback.
Okay, and then that last question.
And number 3, kind of theological. Yeah.
But I'm not sure I did the right theological thing. I did one of those pages of questions. in the packet you
I'm
sent
so
us.
confused
that's
as to
fine.
But
what
it's
is
printed
the.
out, and, that's,
Yeah, no, that's
all
great.
right, so I have everything.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm still confused.
Yeah.
So what's theological?
The top copy is yours, is everything.
Oh, great.
And the other copies are just the selected.
Okay.
Elements.
So I'll take this one and then,
It's got a post on it.
I'll distribute these.
Okay, so I'm thinking page 3.
Yeah, there's one for me too.
Page 3, page 4. And page 5.
So, yeah.
Okay, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so okay.
That one's the selected for you.
Okay, great.
So I really didn't need to make you 2 copies, but
Yeah, because this has,
because that's
this includes this.
that includes those.
Okay.
I just pulled it out because I thought it was easier to manage.
Great. Awesome.
Here's my packet for you. 3, 4.
And I left my original. No. No. Okay, I was gonna say.
Here's my packet.
Anybody needs a stapler?
Oh yeah.
Thanks. Is that you?
Yes.
Oh no, this is mine that I just gave you. That's for you.
Wait.
That's mine, Laura,
Oh.
for you.
Did I just get?
You just put that to. You just
Okay,
gave it to.
hold on.
Oh, maybe you put the wrong
Okay, I probably
here.
did.
Look,
I
you
probably
just
did.
added
I
an
just
extra
yeah.
piece of paper to it.
Wait, but mine looks the same way. That's why. Let me find my copies of that.
Laura, this is the site placement agreement for team.
Yeah,
Did
I put that under your door.
Oh, you got it to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
a week or two ago.
Okay.
I mean, I just slipped it under your door, so.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, I mean, if that's signed, if that doesn't have
Yeah,
a
that's
signature on it.
yours. No.
Oh, you just printed it
I
out.
just- yeah, I just
Oh.
I wanted to make sure I had it. for you. Okay.
I think I sent you an email on the day that I did that. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't tell you. I just put it under your door.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure I've got it somewhere. That's fine. So who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
So what precisely am I reading through this, or what's the kind of method? am I just sort of speaking about?
You can. I'm just thinking.
No.
Yeah. Why don't you read through it?
Okay, because the verbatim, since the theological reflection is a verbatim, that probably is worth reading through. Anyway.
Yeah. Did you? Were there any parts you did not want to read in front of everybody?
All of that is what I gave. If there was any of that, it's what I. This is meant for public consumption. Anything that was private is in the other one.
Yeah. So why don't you just do?
Okay.
We'll start with. I do want. Yeah, it might not have been clear. I do want you to speak to all the
I can
points.
pull that up.
Yeah, but you could do that less formally than reading.
Okay.
Like if you wanted to.
I'm gonna put the machine on in the other.
It is on.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, it is on, okay.
Unless someone just turned it off, but
Yeah.
it was
I
on
had-
just a second
It
ago.
wasn't on first thing this morning, so I wasn't sure. But,
For everybody's. I guess I'll just start with the goals and then kind of work the other stuff in.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm not going to read everything I wrote here about goals. It's not that interesting. So my goals are there. And for the most part, I feel like I'm still happy with them. I did feel like I might want to make some changes to my third goal about approaching people authentically.
Hold on a second. I do you mind just reading the basic goal, even if you don't read
Oh,
the entire?
no.
Just because I don't want to be
Okay.
reading them as you're trying
So
to
the
talk.
first goal was to develop a vocabulary or language to communicate theology of suffering.
Okay.
The second was to develop active listening skills to improve attention to vocal and body language cues. And the third was to approach people authentically than rather as a teacher or superior. And the fourth was not shying away from difficult conversations. And for the most part, I still feel that those are good goals. I may want to rethink. I'm not finding that I enter a room as a teacher or superior persona, which I think is a good thing for me to realize about myself. I feel like I am approaching authentically, so that has been less of a concern than maybe I had initially thought. And I do really want to keep working on helping patients go deeper into their stories because I still feel like I miss cues or don't give the right promptings to help with that. But I actually think what Janice was saying this morning was helpful in continuing to pursue that. I'm finding that being at Griffin and team is making it clear, at least to me, that sort of personal testimony and not personal testimony like, here's what I believe about God, but sort of personal, having a personal faith and claiming that relationship has been more important than any sort of denominational affiliation. Anytime I've gone into a conversation where someone has gotten really wanted to talk about God and faith and pray, I have found that I am able to speak more authentically from a place of, I am a believer than I'm an Episcopalian. So again, just something that I'm thinking about. Because first and foremost, I am a Christian before I'm a denominational anything. So that's speaking from the heart. And I feel that my pastoral functioning ministry is deepening. I think I've been able to sense myself becoming more attuned to listening for, again, the movement of God or the movement of the Spirit or presence in other people's conversations. So that's been good. Should I go through the rest of my thing, or do you want me to go with the relationships bit? I kind of want to do the relationships because everybody's going to read it if I don't, and it's going to just distract everyone.
That's true.
So I'm just going to read these, and I'll read them as they go, and then I can work back in.
Okay, I have another monkey wrench to throw in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we do the relational,
Mhm.
when you read Laura's, then Laura's gonna immediately
Oh, okay.
respond with what you did,
Okay.
and then you're going to go and do the next person.
Okay.
So by the
So
end,
we'll all do the relational.
yeah,
Okay.
the last person who goes, they've already done their
Yeah.
relational.
Okay. So does that make sense to do? I just worry that if it's here, everybody's
Yeah,
gonna read it,
I
and then
think let's
anything
do
that I
that.
say
Sure.
Jump into it.
will get because
Okay.
no one's gonna pay attention. That's just people.
Did anybody plan on reading those before Liz read them?
Oh yeah, I already looked at them.
Oh, I haven't read.
Well,
I haven't read them. I haven't
See,
read
that's
any.
what I said.
Yeah, I
Everybody's
haven't read
doing
it
it ready.
all.
It's the first thing
I
you're gonna
read
turn
very
to.
quickly though, so
I haven't.
realize
I haven't
most
read
people
any of it.
don't.
Did you even think of reading them?
Well, I was going to read it because I assumed that's what was next. So, and I,
That's the first time anybody's ever said that.
What that I had
That they
already
read it already.
Oh, if I wasn't doing my own verbatim, that would be the first thing that I'd open to and try to find. In all
really?
honesty.
Like,
I didn't think of
That's
that.
so
It was
funny.
just I looked at this page and I'm like next page, and the next page happened to be.
I know I haven't looked at
Interpersonal
any. I
feedback.
haven't looked at any of these.
Yeah.
but I just know. I
That's
just
so
said
funny.
teaching isn't a problem, but coming from a teaching perspective, I know the first thing any student does is flip and look for the grade. And this isn't a grade, but is look for that that evaluation.
That's so
That
funny.
comes from teaching high schoolers.
That is hysterical.
There we go. Let the fun begin.
All right, so I'll just go in order here.
that's one way to look at it.
I feel that I relate to Laura well and that we have a good relationship. We knew each other previously through a class, and I was pleased when I found out she was going to be doing CPE with me. I appreciate the emotional and mental support she's provided when I'm feeling frustrated or annoyed by experiences, and find our mutual support through the CPE process very helpful. She's also very good at keeping the group on task and advocating for what she needs, which I admire. I can see clearly how these skills will help her to be a minister. I find her to be a person of deep faith who works diligently to nurture those connections to God. On a more practical level, carpooling has been awesome, both in regards to lessening the times I need to drive to Derby and providing a space for processing.
Okay, so now I read you it. Okay. Do you want to look at it too, or you'll just hear me say? Because I think I gave it to you.
I'll just listen.
Okay.
Got the paper
You're reading what
I'm
you wrote
reading
back
what I
out.
wrote
back
to
to
Liz.
her.
Yeah, that's what he was
That's the
saying.
part
So,
I didn't
so
know.
then
that's what you just said.
she'll read you next, and you're gonna read what you wrote
Right,
for her.
so then when you-
Yeah.
Okay.
And
We're
then
all
I
doing
thought
the
we were
peer
just
feedback.
No, I thought we
Yeah.
were just saying how we felt about what she wrote. Okay,
No.
got it.
Okay, so I relate very well to Liz. We are around the same age and both in classes at YDS. I have greatly appreciated her company and support throughout this program. I think that Liz has a calming presence as a chaplain. She is inquisitive and bright. I know that she is concerned about a teacherly presence, but I have not found this to be the case.
Okay, so now I read Doreen. I got it.
Yes,
All right, I figured out.
correct.
Working together on Thursday evenings has helped me to get to know Doreen better. I admire her tenacity and pluck to embark upon a third career and to build upon her past work as a nurse and social worker. Her humility in working to re-educate herself as a chaplain is also admirable. I believe she feels she's still working to open herself and trust us, yet I see that mutual trust building in her. Through her stories about her life and faith as a practicing Catholic, she is helping me to gain a deeper understanding of the Catholic Church and the beauty of the tradition. That is reshaping my understanding of Catholicism and allowing me to open myself to its gifts, as opposed to what I might hear from non-practicing Catholics about it. Her feedback is gentle yet insightful, and she consistently sees the heart of the matter.
Thank you. Can I frame that?
If you want to.
Okay. All right. So I wrote, Liz is the youngest of our group and sees others as one-of-a-kind, non-gendered individuals without stereotype functions. She shows me a different world from mine with her insights and vocabulary. She also takes her time to consider all the options before making any judgments. I see her as very intelligent and a deep thinker. She's very self-assured for her age and compared to what I was at that benchmark. Liz and I have worked many evening shifts together, and I have enjoyed our dinner conversations. I feel comfortable with her as a colleague and in asking her for help. Example, current vocabulary list for inclusive pronouns. Interesting note is that I have never felt motherly towards her, although she's probably close to my youngest daughter in age. I do feel upset when she talks about being mistaken for male and admire her ability to take it in stride. Her choice of working with high school or college students seems perfect to me and very much needed by that generation who are overwhelmed with stress and chaos in their world.
Gina is an energetic and well-meaning person with an open personality. Out of the group, she's the person I feel I know the least well, as we do not share any clinical hours. She never hesitates to offer her opinions or ideas in class or during projects. Her enthusiasm is inspiring. Although working to keep discerning group dynamics and read the emotional body language cues of others could be helpful in equalizing the dynamics of relationships and deepening connection. Her willingness to put herself out there and take risks are important assets for a chaplain to have when mindfully coupled with stillness and self-reflection. I appreciate her perspective and feedback as a person both within and outside of the Christian tradition, as well as her insight into alternative practices.
I didn't write as much for everyone, but I think it's still pretty on target. So Liz, I think we come from chaplaincy from very different perspectives, but I really appreciate her thoughtful comments. My impression is that she might be quite intuitive, whether or not she knows it. She worries a lot about being teachery, but I rarely see her exhibit this trait. She seems a bit hesitant to share with both me personally and with the class, but I believe this is her natural inclination.
Thank you, everyone. So should I circle back to just touch on other elements of my? Okay. I'm just going to pull up the rest of my report on my iPad. And I'll kind of do just a summary of the other parts. So I'm finding that
Do you want? I have my paper. Do you want that?
no, I've got it here. I'm just kind of thinking about how to summarize.
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting there thinking that could be tough to. So I think I have to really read it.
I am
The summary
saying,
is different.
I've worked with patients here and at team, more here than at team. I'm finding that using silence and active listening have been really helpful, and that when I'm tired or it's getting close to the end of a shift or my time to go home, that's when I tend to check out and be just thinking about other things. And when I don't take a little time between visits, that can make the next visit not as productive as it could be, because I just haven't processed and given myself a minute to breathe and then moved on. I'd say one of the most rewarding encounters I had was the client at team. It was a very, very long conversation, like over 2 hours. But I felt that it really gave that person the space they needed to share what was going on in their lives. One of the most difficult ones was a patient in the CCU who just seemed intentionally agonistic. And he would oppose anything that I offered, and ultimately launched into a tirade about like the war against plastic. And it was just a very challenging conversation, because his personality was very antagonistic, and he wanted to kind of be on this tirade about modern culture and not himself. So that was challenging. I've also been just reflecting and learning on the word chaplain, because for some it's enough to create an implicit trust, I've found, and for others it's kind of a turnoff or what's a chaplain, and then a need to explain what that role is. And I think as a chaplain and religious leader, it's my responsibility to be sensitive to the ways that people are going to respond to the words that I'm using, because for some that might be foster a welcoming space, and for others it might be like, chaplain, reminds me of religion and I want nothing to do with that. So it's my job to be sensitive and attuned to those things. Working with staff, I think I haven't had like extended or very meaningful interactions with doctors or nurses here. I mean, I've had good interactions, but no like deep connections with any of the staff here. At team, I feel like I have a little more of that connection, just because Agna and Lori are more present and we know them a little better as people. And after Agna and my 6-hour Meals on Wheels experience, I feel like we have a good understanding. When I saw her yesterday, there was sort of a different dynamic, I really felt. 'Cause that was the first time I'd seen her since doing Meals on Wheels. And it felt like there was a different dynamic that we sort of slid into a better, more authentic relationship than we might have had before that. So that was kind of neat. We don't really work on units, but I definitely feel most integrated on the floors at Griffin. I have a sense of what my role is, how things are running, and I feel like the staff generally understands and mostly values what I'm doing. And I think at team in the ED, though, I still sort of feel the least integrated. The ED is it's tough. People are in and out. The nurses are busy. The doctors are busy. It can be chaotic. So sometimes I find it a difficult place to work or to be around without people being like, "What are you doing here?" No one has ever said that, but sometimes the message from people has been like, "No, we don't need a chaplain." And at team, like with Agna and Lori, I feel integrated. With some of the other staff, I don't, because they're not really sure who I am or what I'm doing. And so I still have people even yesterday who are like, "What department do you work for?" And I think with time and with continuing the program there, that might dissipate eventually. Let's see. Learning about myself. I've learned that I have greater patience and calm presence than I thought. I've known I was patient, I think. But I tend to think that I am an anxious person. But people don't seem to experience me that way. So that's interesting for me to think about. And I've also learned that my connection to God is perhaps deeper than I thought, and I can draw upon it to speak in different ways about God. That I'm not tied to one specific vocabulary for God. And that has been really good for me to realize about myself. And that comes from, I think, having sort of moved through different denominations and different ways of looking at God. And so I can speak, I don't want to say I can speak evangelical, but I can use that language if that feels more appropriate. I can use a more sort of rigid prayer book, Episcopal tradition based on what I'm kind of hearing from a patient. I didn't see myself as being very good working with adults, but I'm finding that easier than I might have expected. I've just worked predominantly with college students and teenagers, so that's where my experience has been. And I have not had much experience working with people really over about 35 or 40, just given what I've been doing. I think that my strengths are patience, listening skills, non-directive conversation abilities, and theological education, biblical literacy, and a relationship with God. I think my limitations are awkwardness and testing the boundaries of going deeper into conversation. I think I sometimes create awkwardness by walking into a room with a weird presence, or I don't know that I do it regularly, but I have some times that I've gone into a room and I've felt like I kind of caught the patient at a weird time, and then it's kind of created a strange opening. I've also had a couple times, I apparently walk quietly, because I've had a number of patients where if they've got their curtain partially pulled, and I come to the curtain, I knock on the wall or whatever, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't hear you coming, you scared me." So apparently I walk quietly. That's my insight there.
We can help you with that. We'll just put weights on your head.
I just need to wear shoes that click, like I did when I was a teacher.
Oh, that's a good one.
I have clicky teacher shoes that make that click click as you go down the hallway. I could start wearing
Tags
those.
in the bottom of your cheek. Funny.
Tap shoes.
I don't know. And that is always an awkward conversation because then I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, and then we sort of have a strange beginning.
Good to see that.
Let's see. I think that the type of listening that I've been learning in CPE has been very helpful outside of CPE because I feel like it's changing how I interact with other people outside of this space. I think sometimes that's a problem when it's like my family and I feel myself trying to move into like a sort of CPE mentality, and my sister definitely doesn't want that from me sometimes. But I find that it's making me more attuned to listening to what people are saying, and to thinking about, am I keeping this service level or am I not? And then many times it's fine to keep it on the surface in outside social interactions, but there have been times where I've thought, I think I've been picking up on cues in other outside conversations more readily about where people might want to be moving. I had a conversation with one of my students over winter break, and she's from Thailand and Buddhist, and she's discerning. She now feels she believes in God, and she's been going to a Catholic church for 2 months, and she's discerning, whether she wants to convert to Christianity. And we had a conversation about that over break, and I was like, oh, my CPE skills are like super helpful right now, because it was a similar type of conversation. Letting her tell the awakenings that she's been having and the changes she's been sensing in herself. It's like CPE has been super helpful here. I've done the peers part, the goals part.
Oh, wait a minute, what about E?
E?
How would
E
you
is
describe
peers,
Oh.
E is,
Oh, myself?
no.
Did I try to skip that?
So
E
Eric,
is your
Oh, was it
relationship
Eric?
with Eric.
Eric,
Let's see.
yeah.
I guess I should just read this because I read everybody
You're
else's.
taking up on my assertiveness.
Well, no, but
You're rubbing off
I
on
want to
her.
hear what everybody else says before it's my turn. So I'm not letting her off the hook. She's
I said
paid in the way.
when we meet for class or IS, I would describe it as mutually respectful and attentive. I feel that Eric wants me and all of us to have positive and deep learning experiences from CPE and to grow in our knowledge of ourselves. The feedback I have gotten on my verbatims from Eric has helped me with that. I would also say our relationship is somewhat sporadic since I feel like I don't get feedback or consistent communication in a way that's always needed. I would appreciate more time to check in, which is challenging due to scheduling. Which I think is known. But, yeah.
True. Maybe not for me as much, but definitely for you. I'm trying to find time.
And then jumping down to social conditions, the social conditions questions. I certainly feel like I see those impacts of social conditions and structures more clearly at team. I think I see them here, but because team is really specifically working with populations who are experiencing crisis in a way that the hospital isn't, I see the impact of poverty, racism, domestic violence, educational inequality in the conversations I have there. Now, sometimes that comes up here, but it's more directly accessible at team. And I don't have a lot of exposure to sort of the welfare or other social support programs in the United States, so hearing client stories and the ways that they're struggling to navigate the system has been eye-opening to me. And so in that sense, being there has been very, very helpful. Just like the roadblocks of, well, if I don't have this paperwork, I can't do that paperwork, or if I don't have this, I can't do that, or, I'm stuck in, I don't have any money, so I'm living with a boyfriend who's hurting me, and I'm going to leave him and go live with another boyfriend, just like the repeating of patterns, because that's the only out that a person might have. So that's been really eye-opening. I think these stories have hit home more at team, because again, those structures and systems are often what brings people there. here they're usually here because they're sick, something's going wrong physically. Over there, there's just different motivations. I wouldn't say that I've had significant involvement in addressing these social conditions. I think exposure is what I'm mostly getting, both the Griffin and IT team. I'm not sure if CPE is meant to address social conditions other than experiencing them, but it has certainly given me food for thought about in the future. Especially as a person who, if I go into universities, if I go into boarding schools, those tend to be very privileged, wealthy situations. Not always, but that tends to be what they are. And so, what is my role in that setting? And I sort of struggle with the sense that I won't be doing enough to combat injustice in those settings. And that we'll be and I'll sort of be complacent in a system of wealth and inequality. And that's something that I really wrestle with when I think about going into work in schools. And I know that part of my role in schools could be to be a prophetic voice and to call out and to bring attention to and to advocate for change in terms of oppression and racism and other forms of intolerance. But I don't know if that will be enough for me. So I just have to, this is something that I've been thinking about and will continue to think about. How do I engage with social conditions, the less privileged, while I'm working in a space that has a lot of privilege? So I don't know, but I do think in the future it might be important for me to feel like I'm connected to some sort of agency or soup kitchen or whatever it is, so that I feel like I'm not just living in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. As a pastoral care provider, I'm learning that I am able to meet people in their common humanity. That's been really good because I was very worried about that teacher part. And again, as I said, I haven't had a lot of experience working with older adults, so I wasn't sure how that would go. I've also learned that I believe I'm by nature more non-directive when it comes to conversation and pastoral care, which is good to hear. And I know that comes from, I worked for years as a writing tutor, and when you tutor writing, you're taught to be non-directive. So you're not dictating how people change their writing, you're saying, you're offering suggestions. So while in CP you're not offering suggestions, I already had some work with non-directive interactions with people. I feel like in terms of leadership, I'm learning to assert myself when necessary a little more, to advocate for a patient or to make my presence clear to staff. When I first started here, I was like, oh, doctors and nurses, they're doing their important doctor and nurse things, and I should not interfere with that. But I'm getting better at, either asking if I could finish before a doctor or nurse comes in, or if a patient is saying something that something's bothering them, going to a nurse nearby and saying, so-and-so is expressing this, I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but this is the concern that I'm hearing. And I also thought planning our Blue Christmas service was really a good experience for me. I don't consider myself very good at liturgy or thinking about liturgy, but I did put a lot of that together, and I felt like it came out really well with all our components. I think it worked itself together quite well. In terms of using CPE to grow, continuing to work on pastoral care skills, I think I still may want to shadow some chaplains, some of the other chaplains here. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily because I feel like I can't do the work on my own. I'm just very curious to see how other chaplains interact with patients. Because, usually it's just me and the patient, and I'm just curious to see what other people are doing. I can also try out new questions or ways of relating to patients. And I think I've been trying to do that a little more, not always coming in with the just trying out different ways of phrasing questions to see if that elicits a greater response. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I know that's not always me. Sometimes it's the patient. And also, I think as we plan more services or group activities, that will be helpful to me as I think about working with a church or a school or a church. Cool. I think that's kind of my summary of everything, except the verbatim theological reflection part.
Yeah, were you thinking we would do this like a verbatim?
Yeah, I guess I kind of did, but I'm happy to, since it's not actually a verbatim, I'm happy to read the chaplain part, unless that's like against the rules.
Well, you've been talking for a while.
That's true.
We can
You all
mix
can talk.
things up.
Would anyone like me to just read the scripture first?
Yes.
I think that would be
Because
good.
I think
I have no idea which one that
it
is.
helps understand the verbatim if
The-
you've heard.
Okay.
Line P3 gives you a hint.
Oh, well, I haven't read it.
Yeah. Well,
There was just
Well,
a
you
word
read
that
right
there was
ahead.
a word that jumped out at me, and I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
"Oh, that's what that is."
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that just by the chapter
Oh,
and
okay.
verse, but
oh, good. Because I didn't know.
no, but I know that.
Once you tell me that word, I know it.
Luke.
Luke 15:11-32.
Yeah. Is this your imaginary one?
It is an imaginary.
Okay, I wasn't sure what number this
Important
was.
to-
Okay,
Yes, it is an imaginary verbatim.
imaginary.
It's very creative.
I had fun with it.
It's fun.
I actually had fun too.
Sorry, I just want to change it to the NRSV.
Oh, yeah.
because
Gotta
I'm
get the
gonna be
right
a snob.
Bible.
Okay,
Because you are.
I say because I'm going to be a snob. The parable of the prodigal son and his brother. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. When he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed a fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'"
Can I be the patient?
Sure.
I'll be the chaplain.
I think there's only 2 parts.
I get to listen. Hello, my name is Liz, and I'm a chaplain here at Team. I understand you were looking to talk.
Yeah, though I can't say I've been too religious lately. It's funny, I didn't think religion mattered that much until I left home.
Until you left home?
Yeah, I've been away from home for some time now. My father owns a farm back home. He's kind of an important man in the community. We never went without food or comfort, not like now.
Not like now? And I don't think I've gotten your name yet.
Well, my name is, but my brother always calls me Prodigal, or Proddy for short.
Prodigal. That sounds like a harsh thing to call someone.
He's the goody two-shoes of the family, always doing the right thing, never disobeying our father, working like a slave out in the fields. He's the perfect elder son. I'm the younger one. My brother always teased me for being extravagant and wasting our family's money. I thought he had no imagination. But now, I guess he might have a point.
You might have a point.
Yeah, maybe. About 6 months ago, I asked my father for my inheritance early, the share of the property that would belong to me. I thought it would be fun to travel and see the world. I had all that money, you know? Drugs, prostitutes, parties. It was one hell of a time. Damn, what have I done? Did they tell you how I got here?
No, how?
I got wicked high at a party a few weeks back, and I ended up in the emergency department of the hospital near here. I was totally delusional, and I guess I threatened the girl I was with. They kept me there all night and sent me out once I was sober, but I had no food and no place to go. I had nothing, absolutely nothing. We may be in one of the richest countries in the world, but for people who are poor, there's a famine going on. No money meant no food unless I wanted to steal it, so I bounced around couch surfing with some of my buddies and a few girls, but nobody had enough to eat themselves and wouldn't share with me. In the last place, my buddy was spending it all on heroin. The place was a mess like you wouldn't believe. When he OD'd, I knew I had to get out of there. The guys who took him in the ambulance told me about this place and said maybe I could get some help here.
You've been through such instability and loss since you left home. What gives you strength in these tough times?
Well, it's not like I'm completely hopeless. I actually figured I'd get myself a job to try to do better. Animals and farming are what I know, so I showed up cold to that farm, Field View over in Orange. Had to walk all the way over there, but I was able to hire myself out. The owner sent me into his fields to feed the pigs. Oh boy, I've never been so happy to see pigs in my whole life. I'm Jewish, or at least I used to be, so we don't eat pork and consider pigs to be unclean. But I'm telling you, these pigs were a godsend. At least until I realized I was so hungry, I would have gladly filled myself up with the pods they were eating. Nobody gave me anything, though. So I came here. I thought maybe I could get some food stamps or something. Even a can of soup would go a long way. The caseworker said she'd see what she could do.
I'm glad you found your way here and are getting connected to the support you need. You mentioned your faith. I think I heard you say you used to be Jewish.
Yeah, that's how I was raised, and my family still is. But lately I've been feeling so awful these past months. I've sinned against heaven and against my father, disregarded the law, and given up praying. You know, I think I miss it though. I miss Shabbat, the candles, the community, and the food. How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger.
What might it feel like to seek forgiveness, either from God or from your father? God rescues and restores. He took the ancient Israelites out of Egypt and eventually guided them to the promised land.
Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly an easy process.
True, there was temptation and struggle, but God did fulfill his promise.
Yes. I don't even know what my father would say. He's such an upstanding man, and I'm a worm who isn't even worthy to be called his son. I've literally wasted all the money and the property he spent his lifetime working towards. Would that kind of a man want me back? He's better off with only my older brother. I'm too broken, too prodigal. That's me, the good old black sheep prodigal son.
I hear you talking a lot about how upstanding your father is. Do you think he loves you, though, and wants the best for you? He did choose to give you your inheritance without asking questions and knowing that you had the freedom to do with it what you wanted.
I guess he loves me. I've never really thought about it before. But I feel like the only way I could go back is as his hired hand. I don't deserve better than that now. I'd have to say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.
How do you think he might react?
I don't know. He has a lot of hired hands already, so maybe he doesn't need me. Maybe he'd laugh. Maybe he'd be upset.
He might not need you as a hired hand, but might he need you as a son?
He's got my brother. One good son is enough.
Sounds like you're really hard on yourself and negative about your father's opinion. Might he not also forgive you, just as God would?
I don't know. It's just so far away, and I've been so dissolute. I could start over here. It's not great, but it's something.
The decision is yours. I do wonder, though, that it might be what it might be like for you to contact home or even return.
I'll think about that. I've got the pigs for now, though, and hopefully some food stamps. Thank you. I've taken up too much of your time. Plus, Valley Transit will be here soon.
I'm here to listen to whatever you might want to say. Thank you for sharing your story with me. I hope you are able to find some clarity about your direction as you build your life here.
Me too. Thank you again.
You can always contact me through Team if you would like to talk again.
Right, I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, thanks for listening.
You are very welcome.
You get to read my favorite. The client has gone through a lot since leaving home and was coming to understand the implications of his actions. In his story, he spoke of a number of risky behaviors and living situations, so it was a relief to learn that he'd found himself a job, even if it is a menial one, and was working with Team to gain some stability. He seemed to carry a lot of guilt over the squandering of his father's money and mistakes he made. While his story reveals a number of poor choices, I attempted to help him see that there is hope for him in regard to his future and his situation in life. He spoke highly of his father, and by exploring that relationship, I attempted to get the client to see himself as a needed and loved part of the family. I'm not sure I was successful in doing so, but I wanted to counteract the client's dismissive treatment of himself and his feeling of low self-worth. He seemed to compare himself to his older brother frequently, indicating that he falls short of the standard his brother had set. I hope that by the end of the conversation, I left the client with options to consider about whether to make contact with his family or stay estranged. Theological reflection. The client mentioned his Jewish faith and the importance it played in the life of his family. He was struggling with his faith, seemingly due to his feelings of guilt and willingness to see himself as a sinner. While I'm not Jewish, I felt it important to remind the client of God's forgiveness and draw his attention to some examples in the Hebrew Bible of struggle and testing. Ultimately, I wanted the client to realize that God does not abandon or forsake us, and that he was not irredeemable. This conversation was a bit challenging for me, as I didn't want to accidentally say something that was a Christian belief as opposed to a Jewish one. I think I did all right in that sense, but I did find myself considering what I said very closely. Ethical issues. None, although I didn't want to be too directive in suggesting how the client should proceed. Sometimes at Team, it can be easier to slip into a role of giving advice rather than serving as a non-judgmental chaplain presence. Areas to explore and follow. Exploring a Jewish interpretation of forgiveness could be an interesting topic to consider in light of this conversation. About a month after this conversation, the caseworker at Team mentioned she'd had an update from the client. Apparently, he spent a few more weeks in the Derby area before deciding to go home. Team got him a cheap cell phone and helped him fund the plane ticket back to his family's farm. I was relieved to hear he was reunited with his family and to read this email. Dear Team staff,
This is great.
I wanted to let you know how things went when I got home. Honestly, I was surprised. They went better than I could have ever hoped. My father spotted me while I was still far off, was filled with compassion, and ran to hug and kiss me. I was so ashamed that I told my father what I said to your chaplain, that I wasn't worthy of being his son and had sinned against both him and God, I expected him to turn me away. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, he called the servants to bring me a robe, put a ring on my finger, and sandals on my feet. Then he even slew the fatted calf. He said it was because this son of his was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. I was so overcome with emotion that I almost cried. The fatted calf for me? I used up my inheritance, and my father repays me with this love? It was humbling. He didn't seem to care that I spent his money on prostitutes and drugs. What mattered was that I was home and in one piece. Of course, my brother was upset that my father put on a big celebration for me, and I can't say I blame him. As my brother pointed out, he's never gotten even a young goat to celebrate with his friends. He was very angry and refused to come into the party. It's funny, but I actually felt compassion for him. He's been mean to me over the years, but it did seem a bit unfair that he never got anything special. My father, though, pointed out that he's always been here, and all that my father has belongs to him. I'm not sure if that really satisfied my brother, but I guess I'll find out over time. Anyway, thanks for all your help. I honestly feel like I've grown up a lot in the past few months.
When you were reading the beginning of the letter, the email,
That's great.
yeah, it's really emotional. I could feel the emotion, and it sounded like your voice cracked. I couldn't tell if you were laughing.
It was actually both. This is
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because, I don't know. It's funny to think about the fatted calf, in the context of team.
Yes, actually, I was cracking up partly that it was an email, the Bible and email. It was just it was so funny, that anachronism. Yeah, exactly.
I was just imagining myself sitting in team getting an email that's like, my father killed a fatted calf, and being like,
Yeah.
What? But at the same time, it actually...
In Texas, they do, the pig roast.
Yeah.
Big barbecue.
But it actually was kind of emotional to read it, even though I know it's fictional and I wrote it based on a Bible story, but it was like,
Oh yeah.
wow, that would be really emotional
Yeah.
for
Mm-hmm.
a person.
Just reading that, your verbatim, that's it was so creative and it was funny because of knowing the Bible story, but that's a real story. That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great homily,
Yeah.
to use today because it's so easy to pull it into the current context of
Yeah.
life.
Mm-hmm.
The family,
Mhm.
siblings, sibling rivalry,
Yep.
the one who, does everything that they're supposed to, and the one who does not. What happens? Do parents love children differently? Whether they're good or bad. There's just so much there.
Yeah.
So.
And for me, I chose the prodigal son because I've always resonated with the other brother as the one who did
The prodigal one or
the non-prodigal brother.
Yeah,
The one
yeah,
who
the
stays,
one who
yeah,
stays.
yeah,
Yeah.
The one who stays, the prodigal, what I call it, the prodigal son's non-prodigal brother. I've always resonated with that character because that's been me. I do what my parents
Expect.
and do what, I obey the rules and don't not do my homework. And so that has always been where I've resonated. So as a kid, I would struggle with this verse because I would always say, well, how come, but I did all the right things. Why don't I get that? So, and I've come to understand it differently over time, obviously, or maybe not. But and some of the details here were actually, I had, the day before I wrote this, I had talked to someone in the ED for a long time, and he was going through a lot of the situations that I described here, like living with a heroin addict who had OD'd and trying to get out of there. So I kind of worked them into the story because I thought it's also the prodigal son was living dissolutely, and I'm going to interpret that as
A modern day, yeah. Yeah, it's really good. The chaplain was really good at being a chaplain. I was very impressed.
Oh, I
hours.
I thought you laid it on a little thick with the repeating at the beginning.
Thank you.
If this was real, I would have been like,
Oh,
Liz,
yeah,
come
yeah,
on.
yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I had that feeling at the beginning, but really, it came out.
Until you left home?
Yeah, I know. It's a little
Not like now? He might have a point.
It was hard to get into though, actually.
No, but
in writing this, it was hard to like get into. And I think, from a writing perspective, the reason it's like this is because we don't know the prodigal son's name. We
Right,
don't
right.
know, so I had to like work it in without
Mhm.
being like
Mhm.
giving him a name. I didn't want to name him. I felt really weird. I don't know. So that's part of the reason it's a little like.
It wasn't your sibling?
No, I wouldn't put my siblings. My
Yeah,
siblings are
there's a lot here.
Yeah, there's one.
I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
yeah, it was good. It was really good.
Thank you for that. We'll never think of that passage and say that.
Never. I know. I love the little bits you kind of made up and added in there. I mean, you could have done more of that even. I think, because it really made it modern day, like meaningful, right? Like in a homily, but like you said, you know, it could be a great homily, you know, to really bring it into the present.
One thought I had was, I wish we had a Jewish chaplain
Mm.
in the room to talk about the whole Jewish pig and
Yeah.
the pig piece and the forgiveness, and
Yeah.
because so much of, I mean, it is Jesus's parable,
Right.
but obviously Jesus was Jewish, and different Jewish people, even different rabbis, would have very different takes on.
Yeah.
There's kosher, there's levels, there's secular Jews.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole other category.
And when I was writing it, that's actually the part where I was like, I don't really know. Like, I'm
Yeah.
feeling a little lost in this part of my verbatim, because I don't have that knowledge.
And for some sins, in some levels of Judaism, you are dead to the family. And
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
never mentioned again. You are never, you don't
That's right.
exist, type of thing. You know.
That happens in, you know, a few other things. The Catholics can be that way too. So that some of the
Well, any family can.
Right,
you know,
right.
Certainly.
Any religious tradition that has kind of a purity code, some
Mhm,
kind of
mhm.
way of thinking, there's banishment.
Right.
You know, how far is too far?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a friend and who's Irish, and there's a woman I talk to all the time at the cancer center, and she's Polish, and they both, well, my friend, it happened to her, but the other one happened to her uncle, and once he got divorced, he was not allowed anywhere but in the kitchen, could not come into the house like any other way, had to use the back door and sit in the kitchen, could not go into the living room. It was like, you know, like the red mark on him because he was divorced. And my friend, her family completely disowned her after she got divorced, which is really insane in this day and age. But like serious Irish Catholics, crazy. So,
Yeah.
it does happen.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for all your reflections.
That was great.
It's almost. We're gonna do lunch at 12:30.
Okay.
So if there's someone who's got so much shorter one,
I have a verbatim. I don't if we think we'll have time for
I
that.
think we'll hold on
Okay.
to the verbatim.
Because I thought that might be shorter than.
Yeah, it might be. I just want to make sure we get through
Mm-hmm.
the mid-minutes.
Mine is definitely shorter than everybody else's.
And I actually didn't do the whole reflection part of the verbatim. I don't know what I was thinking, but it didn't occur to me to have to do the whole thing. So mine's incomplete.
I didn't know. I just thought, it's the reflection is where
I know.
stuff comes
I know.
out.
I could probably. I know. So anyway, so I'll have to probably finish that before
Yes, we'll do Dorian's.
I present it.
All right, so here, those are my goals. My name's not even on it, and I didn't notice that before.
Do I have
Great.
yours?
She's passing it
Oh,
out
okay,
now.
good. I was gonna say I don't
No,
think I have.
I don't think I did anything out yet. And
It's Dorian's goals, but it just doesn't. It's passing around.
Oh, sorry. I missed that. I was still thinking about the bad cat. Quite literally.
Hope you're hungry, Fawn.
No, because I just think it's funny.
Oops.
I thought I had it all organized, but then.
But you did.
And I have the sheets, but I'm not going to give them yet because you will read them. So now that I learned that from the teacher, I'm not going to do that. Please don't learn from
Don't
that.
pass things out.
Yeah, they were that. It's not what I was supposed to do. Okay, these questions are the ones that I answered. I was going to staple it to them, but I have to look at the answers. And this is the list. Okay, here's the answers to those theologicals. What am I missing?
You keep one of those.
So I think those are the three things. So, and then the other piece that's the non-written, the verbal. So I'll go through the verbal first. So the first one is indicate how you have worked with patients, etc., etc. And it's definitely been a learning curve. I started having real problems. Well, I came into it with a mindset I didn't even realize I had, but so many people had said, "Oh, you got this." And nursing and social work background, you got this. I mean, listening, I was a clinical therapist for years. You got this. Wrong. So I, had one expectation, and all of a sudden I was like, boom, wrong. This is so different. And in the beginning, it was so hard to turn off the I can help, I can fix it piece, and I don't find that so much. Once in a while, I still do, and I, pick up on it. But, it's so different when I talk to people. I'm like, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about. You don't appreciate what, how different it is for a chaplain, So I feel, that I've already learned so much, and I still have this, big hole of stuff I need to learn.
I'm sorry, don't mind me if I hide behind this. It's just there's a reflection of that
No,
van
no
that I
problem.
can't
You
take.
can sit over here if you want.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's better.
So rewarding encounter, most difficult encounter. I think rewarding encounters, there's been a couple of them. And certainly one was the verbatim I did about the gentleman in the ED, and spending all that time with him, and very, very few words passing between us. But then God was good. I got to see them just before they got discharged, and to hear and see and feel his gratitude for having stuck it out with him. Kind of spoke volumes about, you never know how much your presence means, and often we don't get that feedback. In some of the most difficult encounters, there's been two, and in both cases it was gentleman spoke about his wife dying, and that he's estranged from his daughter for 6 years. And I remember leaving the room and thinking, 6 years, please God, not 6 years. It's already been 6 months. I don't want 6 years of this. And then just recently, yesterday, I was sat with a gentleman in the cancer center, and he spoke volumes about his son who, moved him in with him and is taking care of him and pays for everything, and it came up by, I said, do you have support? Because he was there alone, and towards the end, and he was like, yeah, I'm very blessed, my son, blah blah blah. But at the very end, as the nurse was turning him off and taking things out, he said to me, I said to him, I think our time is almost up. I want to ask you if there's anything particular that you would like me to pray for you or with you about. And he said, well, pray for my daughter now. Of course, all I knew about was the son. He said, she hasn't spoken to me in 15 years. Well, I almost lost it. I mean, I just almost lost it. And so I did pray with him, and then I went to the little, space, quiet space, chapel space, I don't know what's it called over there, and sat there, and, had to, one, talk to myself, and then I had to talk to God, and then I had to talk to myself. I was like, if you're trying to tell me something, God, I don't want to hear it. Because it's not what I want to hear. So that was difficult. How have I worked with staff? And it's funny, I feel the most connected with staff when I'm in the intensive care unit or in the emergency department. Old habits die hard. I feel the most integrated, most comfortable. I think, and part of that is because I understand all the chaos that's going on around me, and it's easy for me to, be fixed. I had a very interesting thing with the staff 2 nights ago, or afternoons ago, when I was in the ED. I was talking to someone in the hallway, and I saw 2 stretchers. I mean, they were full, absolutely. I mean, there were people everywhere, including a line in the area where they keep the wheelchairs, which is the outside space to the ED. I mean, every chair in the ED was full, every bed was full, and then there were people out in that area.
Was this Wednesday?
What's today, Friday? Yes.
Yes, and I said, oh my God, it looks like the ED has exploded.
Yes.
Just looking at the chart in the computer world.
So I had come over from the cancer center, so it was about 3-something in the afternoon, and it was just, but I've been down there a lot, so some of the people I do know by name, and they do know my name, and I knew they were too busy for anyone to tell me, so I just kind of, looked to see who looked anxious, who looked like nobody had spoken to them in a while. So I'm watching, and I see this woman 2 stretchers up, who's, dressed in disposable scrubs, and I watch her climb over the railing, and just as I start to open my mouth to say, everybody is alerted, and I mean, she made a beeline and just pushing everything out of her way as she went, and they did tackle her at the door. But anyway, so they brought her back, so they ushered out a guy from a room because she had been in the hallway and they needed a room. And they walked this guy out. Now, he's also in disposable scrubs, and I could see his hands, I mean, very anxious. And so I just kind of moved over, excused myself from the person, and moved over towards him and said, what's happening? He said, I don't know, they told me I had to get out of the room fast. I don't know what to do now. I said, well, why don't we walk down the hall a little bit, the other end of the hall, and just wait, and I'm sure somebody will clue us in soon. So then, I had my time with him, introduced myself and stuff. And then they finally did, when that situation, they did get another stretcher, and they asked him, to sit there, that he was going to be in the hallway now. And anyways, make a long story short, he was very anxious and really didn't want to talk. And I asked him, well, what did he do to calm himself? And he said, reading. So I came up and got one of the Bibles and took it back down. He mentioned that one of the things he reads periodically is the Bible. And, when I saw him 3 hours later, he was still reading the Bible. But in the meantime, one of the nurses grabbed me and said, can you do me a huge favor? And I said, okay. And she shoved this tray in my hand, and she said, room such and such, because they were behind. Everybody's lunch had been sitting there for 2 hours, and there were just not enough bodies anymore, so it was just a matter of this person needed somebody to open the things because they were there with a broken arm and they only had one arm and it had the IV in it and blah, 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 you know. So I did. So the next day when I'm down there, this nurse sought me out when I came out of the room. She said, "Can I speak to you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I apologize. I know that wasn't your job, but I can't tell you how grateful I am that you didn't ask any questions and you were just able to do it." And she said, "I don't want you to think we were, misusing you. You know, you're the chaplain, and we're glad when you come down. But we were so far behind, I just, And I said, no problem. I, understand that it was a one-time, you needed help and you needed it in a very physical way. I'm glad I could help. And she said, well, you're a godsend. I said, well, that was God's intention. So, but
That's
anyway,
a nice update because you told me that I was here with her on Wednesday. We had dinner and you told me she shoved this thing and I gave a sandwich and I was like, well, that's nice of you to help out. And so now at least
then
then
the
they
next day
appreciate
when I went
it.
down, she sought me out and wanted me to know that one, she knew I was a chaplain, and two, she knew it wasn't something that,
That's great.
so, but, sometimes in the trenches, you do that and it leads to something else. So, anyways, so I thought that was good. What have I learned about myself as a chaplain? I've learned that the past never goes away and that all our experiences come with us. Each step that we take in this journey of life. And some of what I've learned are my strengths because I've lived a long life already, longer than any of you, and that I can use that in my encounters with others, and that doesn't have to be my limitations. I always felt good about sharing my joys that I've had in my life, and there have been many, but I've always had a hard time sharing my sorrows because I didn't want them to be a negative to pull anyone else down, etc. But I have also found that they don't have to limit me, that they have actually made me stronger, and in many cases have made me a more compassionate and better person. And also my troubles have always been my strongest encounters with God. They have always, even if in the beginning they turned me off in any way and pushed me away, they eventually were what brought me back and brought me back on a deeper level and a deeper, at a deeper place. What would I modify my goals? You have my goals, and they, still trying to make sure that I'm looking at what I'm doing, as a chaplain.
Are these the original goals or the
These
new
are
goals?
my original. I have never updated them yet. So, I'm still developing, my skills. And when I say across all groups, I mean, age groups, race groups, religious groups, it's just that having that universality that I'm still looking for. But I'm getting a lot from the feedback and from, even, our time this morning when we discussed how we reflected on those. And my personal goals, I'm feeling better about my trust levels, and feeling that it's okay to talk, that it's, safe, and that, my past doesn't define me, but it doesn't make who I am. I'm becoming more and more comfortable with the fact that I'm where God wants me to be at this time. I feel such joy when I drive to the ferry on my way over. It's amazing, and several people have commented on it, family members and a few friends. I can see you're happy with what you're doing, and I am. And feel very grounded that this is where I'm supposed to be at this time and place. So I'm glad to be in such good company as I go forward. Aware of social conditions and structures and everything. I have a real good link to that. It was very easy for me to understand team because I did a lot of that for my church the last 10 years. Understanding social conditions at Griffin. I learned something yesterday, and I love it when I learn a new tidbit. I met a woman in the ED who works there, and her job, she's the outreach coordinator for the ED, and everyone who comes in who has certain types of health insurance, she does an intake with them to make sure that they're also not in need of food and other, heat and other things that, are available out there. So she's not a social worker, but she, has that, that bridge of if somebody's on this type of insurance that's for low income, are they in need of anything else? So as long as we have them here at Griffin, we're going to check on that and give them the resources, to make sure. And also that that's not what's impacting their health. In other words, like a diabetic, if they have limited food and they're going to a food pantry, they may not be eating the right things for a diabetic because that's all they can get. And, this type of thing, which may be why they're circling back in with these problems constantly. So I had a chat with her, and it was very interesting and very educational. The preaching, teaching, most of that I'm at 0, looking to move up. But I will say, doing our first service, our winter, that was mind-blowing. And like I said, then I went to another one just to see, and we got an A+. I only gave them a C, so I felt like we really rocked it, and I was like, wow,
You're not biased or anything.
No,
So
I was
you'll
very
be
meticulous.
preaching at the next one.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what
so-
I'm hearing.
Next Blue Holiday service,
So-
Maureen's giving a homily.
So, but I, it's very exciting, and it's very exciting for me to be with people who represent different decade than what I represent, and to be a part of all of that and get in on that is just it's a real plus. Let me tell you. I feel very privileged. So then, select one of the following. This is where I got confused. In my head, I did one. I did a Bible one, and the one I picked was the Blessed Mother. It's not printed up. The Blessed Mother, and her coming, asking the elders to speak to someone from the synagogue about the fact that she was pregnant and how she was going to tell her parents.
Oh, I love it. It's really cool.
Okay.
You printed for it?
No, I didn't. I because then I went, because I didn't think that was real theology, and then I went to this, and this one we'll go over. But do I have 2 seconds, and I will explain that one?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay, so we'll
But
do
you did write the
theology one.
Mary one.
I wrote it, but I didn't print it out.
Okay, and you sent it.
No.
I want to hear that.
I wanna hear that
I
one.
didn't to the bathroom. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
And did you send me?
I didn't send you anything. I just
Okay.
realized that now. I'm still working on that piece. I did get the answer though. My grandson explained to me that because my tablet and my phone are connected, that's why it's confusing to you about where I'm sending what from.
Thank God, I'm not going crazy.
No, you're not, and neither am I. I said to him, I showed him the email from you and said, "What am I doing wrong?" And he looked at me and he said, "You're not doing anything wrong. You're not understanding, and neither is he. Your tablet and your phone are connected."
Right. Okay.
So,
That makes
anyways,
sense.
so
Technical difficulty.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but if you want, I can do up the Mary one if you're interested. Or
I would love
Yeah.
to see that.
okay,
At least
so-
send it to me.
okay,
And me too.
You don't mind.
okay.
I would love
So, but the theology one, okay, the questions are on this page, and then my answers. I realized afterwards maybe I should have rewritten the questions first. But so the first one is alone with a patient who is near death and too critically ill to speak. I might do the following. So, for me, I might read the Bible, especially the Psalms that I find very soothing. They're almost lyrical, some of them,
Yeah.
It's funny, I don't like the, what is it, the 23rd Psalm?
Mhm.
For some reason, I don't like that one. And I have yet to really figure out why I don't like it, because, we use it so often. But there are some before and after that I really love and think speak volumes. Play soft music or some chants, for the atmosphere. I find sometimes, even in this chapel, and especially over at the Cancer Care Center, when you walk in there and there is no background soft music or no even white noise, I find it more difficult to center myself. So I wonder how other people do.
Sometimes they do have someone playing in the lobby. Have you ever encountered
Yes,
that? Yeah.
yesterday
The
there was a
guitarist
man.
and
No, there was a man playing the piano.
Oh, nice.
And I had a talk with him, and he told me that he knows lots. He plays for a church, and he knows lots of sacred music. If I had any requests, mine wasn't a sacred one. I wanted "Bridge Over Troubled Waters," and he knew that too. And then one of the guards came and said to him, "I haven't heard that in so long, and it has so many memories and everything." And he said, "Well, the chaplain asked for it." And I said, "Well, it has a lot for me too, because that was the song that hit #1 when I was pregnant with my daughter, who turned 49 last month, who isn't speaking to me. Bridge Over Troubled Waters still speaks to me with that child. So what intuitiveness I had there. So the third one, the first question, the third one is physical contact. I like to find a place to lay my hand, if it's on a shoulder or the upper arm or the hand if it's out, because I think even if someone's unconscious, they can know that we're there. Or I like to be just as close as I can. I will pull the chair. I mean, I sometimes feel like I've almost climbed into the bed. I'm so close. I often put the railing down so that I can be right there at their head. And I don't have a problem, surprisingly, with silence now. I'm getting much better at, so if I could lay my hand on them and just, meditate for myself, and just be that ministry presence, it's okay with me. The second question, the first time I ever dealt with my own mortality, I was 20 years old. I was driving back from Boston. Had seen a friend, and it was pouring. You know how cats and dogs pouring, where your wipers can't wipe it fast enough, you really can't see. So I decided that I had to get off the highway, and there was this guardrail, and then there up ahead was this big opening, because that part of the road exits are way far and few. And I saw this big opening, and there were no cars on the road, none, around me at all, and decided that I would pull off there. Well, little did I know that somebody had taken the railing out 2 days before, and it was actually a cliff going straight down. And that's what I drove off. I drove off the road, and I do mean completely off the road. I was in a red Volkswagen Bug, and just turned and turned and turned. And my life flashed in front of me. I remember screaming, no, no. And the last thing I remember before going unconscious was that I was soaking wet, to find out later that, I mean, I could smell gasoline, but I didn't know at the time if I was covered with blood or covered, but they told me later I was covered with gasoline. Because all my injuries were internal, I wasn't bleeding outside. And the fact that my pain in my chest was that I broke everything in my chest. There was not a bone that was not broken, including my sternum in 3 places, which is pretty hard to do, they tell me. And I was unconscious for the next 3 days.
Were you wearing a seatbelt?
I have no idea.
But it was before, obviously, before.
Before seatbelts were so
What do you call
in,
it?
so I
Airbags.
don't really know.
Before
No,
airbags.
there were no airbags.
Wow.
No, that and the steering was up against my chest, which is what made the impact into my chest more than anything else. So I, at that instant, I thought about it, but certainly after I had a long stay in the hospital. During that time, I thought a lot about the fact that I mean, because everyone who spoke to me told me how I almost died. I mean, it was a constant, the doctor said it, the nurse said it, the, cop who came to take the report said it, that, type of thing. But the peace, and the reason I don't tell this story very often, because I feel like, but a car stopped, and the guy went down and pulled me out before the car exploded.
And this was just a random person?
Yeah. Don't have a name, nothing. He stopped another car to get off the exit and call for help, and made his way down and pulled me out because the car burned to smithereens and all my information burned in it. So that's why I was a Jane Doe for 3 days, because they didn't know who I was and my family didn't know what happened to me. I just never showed up. So my oldest brother started out from home and worked backwards, stopping at every town police station.
Oh my.
Because he assumed, because they knew I had left, they called my friend and she said, this is what time she left, this is, but they didn't know how far I went or anything. So anyway, so I knew at a young age that life was a gift and that you don't ever take it for granted, ever. So anyway, so God obviously had other plans for me because I am here many, many years. 50 years later, I'm still here. Of course, my uncle would say that's because God doesn't want me up there.
Who says this?
My uncle. He was a priest.
To you specifically, or
Yeah,
just to
no.
people in general?
No. He was a priest, and he used to say to me, well, God doesn't want you yet, Doreen. What does it feel like to travel with someone who's diagnosed with a terminal illness? I always have 2 reactions to that. One is it's definitely a privilege to walk with somebody on their journey when you know they're headed, to the end of their journey. I mean, it's, you know they're terminal, so you know where you're going with them. But it's also a burden sometimes, in the sense that what they reveal to you and what you take on, from them. And I find that that's the piece that I have to work at to go to the chapel and leave it there, not take it home with me, not take it on, to put it in a sacred space, a place, but to leave it in that place. Sometimes I envision the the glassware, the
Mm.
pieces in the chapel,
Mhm.
that I put it in there for safekeeping. You know, does that sound weird?
No,
just-
Mm-mm.
I never thought of that, but that's nice.
You know, I just visually
Mhm.
will go up and put it in there, you know, so that I can leave it here in a sacred place, you know. So,
What about
okay, sorry, and so the last one, the second to the last, understanding of what happens when we move from life to death. My vision of heaven is always, as long as I can remember as an adult having it, is to see the face of God. And that the face of God is so brilliant that it would be like getting up close to the sun. It sort of, everything else evaporates or gets, you know, there's nothing else. I mean, you're just, you know, and that hell is the opposite. Hell is knowing that the face of God is there and you're here and that you will never cross that line, but that you will be that close. And that's got to be the anguish of, like for me, to be this close to my daughter who's only on the other side of town and not be able to see her face. That's a physical anguish. So multiply that by zillions of zillions, you know, that is. And the last one, to be creative, and creative is not what I am, but I had fun with this piece and I thought, well, I always wanted to be a painter, and part of that is because one of my granddaughters is an exquisite painter and I'm always in awe. And so, you know, you come in with this canvas that has nothing. It's white, you're pure, you're a child, you know. And then we color that canvas as we go through life. You know, red is blood, but it can also be courage, yellow for joy, and, you know, all these different things, all the different pieces in our life, color it up, you know. And then when we've lived a long, full life, there's so much color on this that it begins to darken, you know, just because it's layer upon layer upon layer. And it goes black as we exit. And we're in the new life given a new canvas, but this one's translucent. You can't paint on this one. This one's see-through. It's sheer, translucent. All the colors are in it, depending on the angle and the light, but you add nothing to it. But your life is there. It's all in this translucent frame. So, and then the last is, you guys, really quickly.
See, I've already heard mine, so I'm just like,
That's right.
I've already heard mine, so I'm just chilling.
You're just chilling. Okay, so Gina, I did you first. Gina, to me, is the more non-traditional person in the group. She speaks of the female god, astrology, yoga, healing touch, and seems to be more of a dreamer. In addition, I find her intuitive, deeply emotional, and she has such a joy for living life that comes across in all her actions. I feel I should have the most in common with her, Gina, given our age, our marriages, and motherhood. We were both born into the Catholic faith, Catholic families, and have had other careers to date. Yet we are so different. I put yet in again. Oh. It is the difference that tells me I would want Gina at my bedside if I were dying. The vision I see of scented candles, soft music, a warm touch, all would make me feel so loved and cared for as I leave this world. The only negative for me is at times I feel Gina talks too much. I've said this before to you, and is too loud or laughs when not totally appropriate. On the other hand, I feel deeply that she copes with issues and even perhaps her pain in this way. Liz,
Gina's
I did.
supposed to respond to you.
Oh, sorry.
Do you have a copy for me?
Oh, thought I gave you one. Sorry. Didn't I give everybody
No,
one?
I have one.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, I have one. No, I
You
have
have none?
Doreen. It seems we all had to earn her trust. I feel an affinity with her since she is Catholic, and I really do appreciate her wisdom from her past work experiences. She has had some great ideas and feedback both about the group activities we plan and on verbatims. I do hope she's feeling more confident about her chaplaincy work because I think she's a natural for it.
Laura. Laura, in my mind, is the achiever of the group. I am up in awe of her, especially her ordination in May and her serving all summer as a pastor of a small church. She is so comfortable with herself, assertive and focused. Her goal is at hand, and she is moving towards her destination. Yes, sometimes I feel she is frustrated with this class and that it doesn't serve her needs. I share her frustration at times and agree with her that I too wish for more structure, although I also realize how this is not that type of program with more didactic and less experiential. Although Laura has the promise of my fantasy job, I am concerned for what may be ahead of her as she travels all the years that I have survived. It can be a long and lonely road at times, even with the gift of faith. I want to spend more time with Laura to learn from her perspectives.
Doreen, I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I had in December to get to know Doreen more. I felt that we worked very well together at the teen toy drive and at Griffin. She often jokes that I help her to be more assertive. I am very grateful for her reflections about my assertiveness because it is so natural to me that I often don't even notice or think much about it. And I realize that it might come across as brash to future congregations that I serve. I appreciate the wisdom that Doreen brings to our group. The variety of life experiences that she has had contribute greatly to our group learning.
Oh, and you did those already?
Yeah.
Good.
There we go.
Thanks.
Sweet. Thank you.
Any last word?
So, glad to have it over.
Yeah.
It does make it there's a burden off going into the afternoon.
I know,
Yeah,
yes.
it's like-
I can feel that. I
Check
can
that
feel
off. It's done.
Okay, lunchtime.
Yes.
So, Agna and Lori should be down there now. They said that they have till 2.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll
Need all that.
need all that, because I do want to give you guys enough time to work together on the next project.
Yeah,
For them.
did you realize I'm not here that day? You kept saying we're all here. I just noticed it.
What? Remind me.
Next
Friday,
The 24th.
I'm not here.
Yeah, I thought everybody
It's
was
just the three of
here,
us.
and she told me that the other night,
Yeah.
and I said, oh, but she can still help plan it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. But ooh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I am going up to New Hampshire, so to come here first would really be
Not helpful.
Yeah. Before you go down there, how much time do you think you want just to work among yourselves on the?
On next Friday?
Yeah.
I think 30 minutes would be helpful. 'Cause
I was going to say an hour, so maybe 45. What do
I
you
don't
think?
you need now. We
Probably don't do that.
Yeah, I actually think the bigger planning bit for this is actually going to be like the getting of supplies.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay, so how about
if we've only got from, well,
we do need to finish the mid-units, and so I'm thinking from 1:30 to 2.
I mean, do we need an hour with Agna and Lori? Is there
yeah,
an
I
hour's
don't
worth
know
of
if we
stuff
need
to
that
talk
long for
about?
lunch. That seems like a long time for lunch.
yeah, what is our is
Kind of
there
a check with them.
Yeah.
Kind of a check-in. We're all in the same place at the same time. It's partly for me to hear from them, and for all of us to hear from you how things are going, how we can improve anything, have better communication, any of that. What I'm thinking is, I have to meet with Janice, so what I'm thinking is I'm gonna go meet Janice at 1:15, so that gives me 45 minutes
Okay.
with all of you.
Okay.
And then if you guys are needing half hour to 45 minutes, you can do 1:15 or 1:30 to 2 to work on your thing. and then we can be done with.
So we'll come up here 1:15, 1:30, and then.
Okay, but we won't be in this room.
Oh, we won't be in
that
this
one.
room, right,
Oh.
okay. Or maybe
And
we
still
should go
put
out
my
and it's
stuff in
bigger.
there.
Where would you rather? Could you meet in the cafeteria, or would you rather not?
I don't see why we couldn't.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just have to take my
Yeah.
stuff with me.
Yeah,
so
that's what I
then
was
the-
thinking. I'd have to.
And then
Or the chapel.
Or the library. Or the chapel.
Or the library.
True.
and then I'll communicate.
Oh, the
I'll
library.
let.
That's good. I
The
like
library
that.
would be a good option.
Yeah, we'll be downstairs anyway. I
We'll
feel like if
definitely
we
be
stay in
done.
the living room, if we stay in the dining room, then it might be
Let's go
Feel
over, let's
funny
go over
to,
the,
you know,
the
shoo them out.
I will call it the Ministry Resource Center, the Health Resource Center, or whatever it is.
The library.
Yeah, the library.
Yeah.
No, there's
Yeah.
there's a nice little room in there if no
Yeah.
one's using it.
Okay.
And if not, there's that table with chairs,
Okay.
and there's almost
From
never
from
anybody.
1:15 to 2, and then we'll be back here at 2.
And then I guess like
back
an
here
hour
too.
Okay.
for
Yeah.
each.
That sounds good.
I don't know if people expect the library to be quiet.
This is a separate little room.
Yeah, but
Okay.
it's almost
Oh, yeah.
never
The group
anybody in
I
there,
also
honestly.
I have good rapport with the woman that works there.
Me too, me too.
Yeah.
We're
Yep. I feel the same way.
fellow
Sounds good.
congregants one Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right.
And our
That's
next class after this is on the 31st, right? That's
Yeah.
I was just looking at that.
And then it's
And the first.
Friday, Saturday,
Okay,
Thursday,
right, both.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because I
Double
have this verbatim that I have right now. I would really like to do. I sent it to you, Eric.
Okay.
One of the issues that it deals with actually is kind of like bordering on sexual harassment in an inappropriate patient.
Oh,
So-
interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that would kind of be a really good learning opportunity for all of us. Just
Yeah.
to
That
talk through
sounds
that.
Okay.
interesting.
But if it has to wait until the 31st.
No, let's do
that's-
that. So I'll be done with Janice at 1:30. Yeah. Well, let's.
And still
I'll probably go to Janice at 1, so I'll keep on quickly.
might need this.